We are now live. Presenter's laptop sound check. Clerk's laptop sound check.
And you are live.
Now, thanks very much and good morning, everyone. Welcome to the January 18th GIC meeting regarding boards and agencies. Quorum is present and I would like to call the meeting to order. Members of the public are advised that our meeting are webcast live by the City of Hamilton, temporarily archived on the city website. As well, a reminder that all electronic devices are to be switched to a non-audible function during committee meetings. Members are reminded of the 5-minute time limit, which will be adhered to during the meeting. Members can submit another question to speak if they require the additional time to ask questions or make comment. So, Madam Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda?
Yes, to you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, there's one change to the agenda today, and that's the addition of the January 14th minutes.
Okay. Kind of a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda as amended. Moved by Pearson, seconded by Johnson. All in favor?
Thank you, Councillor Partridge. So I'm just, Councillor, I got your thumb, Councillor Powers. Thank you so much. Okay. That vote carries 12-0.
Thanks very much. Are there any declarations of interest? Seeing none, let's move on to item 3 then.
Councillor Partridge is waiting.
Oh, I'm sorry. And Councillor Partridge, go ahead.
Yes, good morning, Deputy Mayor. And I do need to take a phone call at some point in time between 10 and 10:30. It will be about a 20-minute call, and then I'll be back on for quorum. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Item 3 is, can I have a mover and a seconder to put the minutes of the January 14th GIC on the floor? Moved by Johnson, seconded by Pauls. Any discussion?
Question from me, please,
Yes.
if you would look at the minutes. It says Ward 5, it lists Chad Collins for the January meeting. I respectfully request that I was in attendance at that meeting. Chad wasn't, and that the minutes be corrected. Thank you.
I will certainly correct that, sir.
That's not very often our Stephanie makes an error. And so we talked about that before the meeting and now we caught her.
See, so, Merry Christmas.
Just wishful thinking it is.
Okay, so we got a mover and a seconder to approve those minutes. All in favor as amended?
Yes.
I assume that carried, Stephanie?
Yes, 11-0, sir.
Thank you. Item 6, which is presentations, and members of the committee, we will take one vote to receive all the presentations after the last presenter. And of course, today is for boards and agencies, and the first up is the Hamilton Beach Rescue Unit. I'd like to call on Chief Wetherington to provide the presentation for the Hamilton Beach Rescue Unit. So, Chief, are you there?
He is there.
If so, can you turn your camera on? There we are. Welcome. And so nice to have you back again, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to show a quick video first, and then I'll get right into my speech.
Certainly. Are you trying to share your screen now, Charlie?
Yes, I was. I don't see my video, so I will just go right into my speech.
Okay, go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, members of council and senior staff. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Charlie Witherington, Chief of the Hamilton Beach Rescue Unit. I've been selected to be your spokesperson for today. For this year's correspondence, we were asked to submit our request for 2022 with the ability to increase our funding request by 2%, which we have submitted. Over the years, the Hamilton Beach Rescue Unit has responded to many emergencies. Over the past 12 months, our members have committed over 1,200 volunteer hours to the unit. Our crews responded to a record 56 missions this year, requiring assistance during the summer boating season. Our average response time to launch was 14 minutes. The average duration of each call was just under 2 hours. We completed 71 on-water training exercises and 3 classroom training sessions due to COVID. With the ongoing help from the Hamilton Port Authority, we were able to keep Rescue 161 docked at Pier 25. With our vessel in the water, it allows us to respond quicker to marine emergencies. We were able to keep 161 in the water longer, relocating our vessel to the garage in the second week of December instead of the second week of October. The rescue unit is normally deployed by the Hamilton Police Marine Unit, Fire Department, EMS, Canadian Coast Guard out of Trenton. Also, Lift Bridge has notified our seen issues in the canal and have called upon us. We continue to work with the Hamilton Fire Dispatch, which includes our weekly test of our paging system and radio system. In conjunction with working with Hamilton Fire, we also have the ability to communicate with the Hamilton Police Marine Unit on the city trunking radio system. These are just a couple of the calls that we've had this past year. Our first mission was a call out on March 27th for one person adrift between Bronte and Oakville Harbor. We had 3 calls for persons in the water, multiple calls for overturned vessels. Vessels have run aground or taken on water. We also had 2 major multi-unit searches that, for both searches, kept our vessel in the water for over 30 hours for each search. With joint operations with the Hamilton Police, the rescue unit volunteers are proud to serve as colleagues of the Marine Unit and serve at their request. The Hamilton Police Dispatch have the ability to activate our call-out pagers whenever required, and we regularly communicate with each of them while on patrols and respond during emergencies. This year, the Hamilton Beach Rescue Unit received the Police Services Board Partnership Award, a contribution for a particularly difficult medical emergency in the Hamilton Harbor. On Saturday, December the 6th, our volunteers of the Hamilton Beach Rescue Unit set out to collect food for the 3rd annual Sink a Ship food drive. Starting at one end of the beach, our volunteers go up to each of the houses that have food left outside on the front porch. Our rescue truck pulls a Zodiac, and when the Zodiac was full, we filled the truck. And this year, when the truck was full, we organized our second truck with another small vessel, and we continue to collect food for the rest of the beach. The volunteers donated over 4,000 pounds of food, and this went to the East Hamilton Food Center, sorry. This is a huge community effort and a very successful one. In conclusion, the Hamilton Beach Rescue Unit respectfully requests consideration for our 2022 proposal in order to continue to serve our community and assist with police, fire, and EMS in any emergency within our city. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charlie. So thank you for staying within the guidelines. Is there any questions for the chief? Okay, seeing none. So thank you. Fred, yes, go ahead, Mayor Eisenberger.
Thanks, and thank you to the Beach Rescue Unit. And I can't let it go by and just kind of inform everyone that it's still the best deal we've got going in our city in terms of safety and security on our harbor and in our lake. So I just want to express my ongoing appreciation, having been a Ward 5 councillor where the Beach Rescue Unit is for a long time. But my heart is always there. Every time I walk along the trail, I get to see not only the rescue unit, but the apparatus that's ready to go should there be an emergency in our lake or in our harbor. And so I just want to say thank you for all that great work, and I fully support their recommended 2% increase. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I was just going to say the exact same thing, Mr. Mayor, but you've done a far better job than I ever could. So, Chief, thanks for the great service that you provide to our community, you and your entire crew and team. We're lucky to have you. So we're going to have one motion to receive for all the presentations when they're finished. So we'll go ahead. Councillor Partridge.
Yeah, I'm on the speakers list. Thanks. Charlie, I have a question for you. The Marine units are doing practice exercises up at Christie Lake. And I'm just wondering, are you participating in that, your unit?
Not in this particular one. We have been in contact with Hamilton Fire in regards to the upcoming ice rescue trainings and that sort of thing. This particular exercise, we're not, but we are working on different ways that we will be assisting with them in the future.
Chief, thank you very much. And Chair, you know, I think it's important for residents out there to know that there's ongoing maneuvers and practicing all the time. And I know that, you know, Councillor Collins, if he was here, always speaks very, very highly and most appreciative of the work that the unit does. And I do as well. Thank you so much, because you do serve the broader community. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Certainly in my briefings from Councillor Collins, he did speak very highly of you. I just have one question. Your budget is made up of operating and also capital. Can you explain to us what the capital budget portion is going to be used for?
The capital portion is to help assist with purchasing of our new vessels and so on as we progress. We have two primary response vessels. Each one of them has a 10-year lifespan. So we do is replace them every 5 years. Sorry, we replace one every 5 years, so it's staggered. So the money that we use from the capital funds goes towards purchasing of new vessels, that sort of thing, as well as the fundraising that we do.
Sure. Supplemental, is there any intentions of replacing one of the vessels this coming year?
Yes, we do have one on. I have been in contact with our boat builder, and we are in the process of replacing our oldest vessel, which I think is right around the 10, maybe 11 years now. That was actually Rescue 161, which is the one that's been sitting at Pier 25 all summer long.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So I have no other speakers, so we'll move on now to 6.2. Thanks, Charlie. And we'll move on to 6.2, which is the Royal Botanical Gardens. And the following parties will be presenting to the RBG: Nancy Rowland, Andrew Duncan, Carrie Hayes, and Emily Robertson. Are you there, Nancy?
I do not see her in the meeting.
I'll do a second call then for Nancy Rowland from the Royal Botanical Gardens. If you're there, can you turn your camera on?
Just a question, Mr. Chair. Are these the time sessions? It shows here that they weren't presenting until 10:15. So is everybody expected to be on deck, or are these those time sessions, or are these just approximations?
Madam Clerk?
It is, through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, they are sent a letter back in October that advises them of the time, but also advises them that the meeting starts at 9:30 and that the times are approximate only. As well, the agenda that's posted on the city's website also notes the times as approximate only. What I would recommend, since they are not here, I don't see any of them here at this time, perhaps if Conservation Halton is available, you want to move on with Conservation Halton?
Shane, are you there? The CAO of the Halton Conservation Authority?
No, he's not in the meeting either. Oh,
I see Lisa Burnside's on. Do you want to jump to Hamilton, or do you want to go let's try Grand River first. Is the Grand River Conservation Authority here?
See if Samantha's here. No. Okay.
Okay, let's move on then to the Hamilton
Hamilton.
Conservation. I see Lisa is here. So Lisa, can you turn your camera on, please? Hi, welcome, Lisa. And of course, I have a very special spot in my heart for the Hamilton Conservation Authority, and I'm glad to see that they're here. And so Lisa is a CAO, and she's joined by Scott Peck, who's the Deputy CAO and the Director of Watershed Planning, and Neil McDougall, the Secretary Treasurer. And Neil has been with the authority now for just over 10 years. And he's just turned his camera on. And I wanted to let the council know that he is retiring in 2022. So this will be his last budget presentation. And I just wanted to publicly thank him for his great service. The board has an utmost respect for him and the accuracy of his numbers and his sense of humor. And he's even a Buffalo Bills fan. And so, Neil, congratulations on your retirement. We're going to miss you dearly. I think Lisa has you on speed dial at home, though, if we need some help on something. And so, Lisa, are you ready to go?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I am prepared and we'd be pleased to move forward with our presentation.
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, well, just again, thank you for Deputy Mayor Ferguson and councillors for the opportunity to present to you today our 2022 operating budget. As noted, I'm Lisa Burnside, the CAO, and I am here with Scott Peck, the Deputy CAO, and Neil McDougall, our Secretary Treasurer. So I'd just like to acknowledge that we do have many HCA board members here today, including our chair, Councillor Ferguson. And we also have fellow council board members. I don't think Tom Jackson is here today, but he sits on our, your meeting today, he sits on our board. Councillor Esther Pauls, Brad Clark, and the newest member on our board, replacing Chad Collins, is Russ Powers. And he has a long past history of service on our board, and we welcome him back. I'd also like to acknowledge that our Vice Chair, Citizen Santino Mocchio, is watching on your YouTube channel here today. So I believe you're aware that we are meeting the levy guideline of a 2% increase. The city has asked of all conservation authorities, and we truly appreciate that support of the city in providing a levy increase. So I'm going to share my presentation now. Okay, here I've got that in front of us.
It's working great. Thanks, Lisa.
I always like to start off with a map of all the conservation authorities in Ontario. So you can see that here, and the HCA is in a little box there to help you find it. We're one of 36 conservation authorities in the province, kind of there at the head of Lake Ontario. And the watershed is the basis for our CA boundaries. It's defined by where the water flows and drains into. Here's an enlarged map of our watershed, and all the green is property that we own. Now, we only have 2 participating municipalities, and with the city making up over 99% of our apportionment, you're not just the major funder of our budget, you're also our major partner, and we certainly have a long history of collaborative relationships. Now, while our watershed may be geographically smaller than many other CAs, we're a major owner of land within our watershed, with over 11,000 acres of owned or managed properties, making up 10% of the watershed. Now, these lands are unique pockets of local green space that help the city and the watershed thrive, and they connect people to nature. And last year, we added 177 acres to our land holdings so we can look to and plan for our future. The value of our lands is significant. It provides a wide range of recreation for the residents of Hamilton and beyond. We have 6 major conservation areas that are open year-round, 295 campsites, a 340 boat slip marina, 2 recreational lakes, and we have an extensive trail network with over 140 kilometers of multi-use trails. And there are ecological benefits of our green spaces for climate change adaptation, and they contribute to the livability of our communities. They're also a source of our self-generated revenue to help offset their operating expenses and support other projects. Now, in terms of COVID, this pandemic has impacted our organization like it has all others. And while our events and education programs and group bookings have still not recovered, the benefits of being in conservation areas and green space has been appreciated like never before over the past few years. We've had record visitation and record annual pass sales. And along with this, though, we have had some ongoing higher costs for maintenance and COVID-related supply chain issues with delays and some unanticipated cost increases in supplies and contractors. Now, as we look to 2022, we're going to continue to leverage technology and add to the experiences we provide. We're going to be launching a mobile app later this year to provide an enhanced trail experience, so visitors are aware of interesting facts and information relative to the specific place they are when they're out hiking. We're going to be adding more buildings to our 360-degree virtual experience for Westfield, with another 16 buildings coming this year that you can view from your home or from your phone when you're on site to add to your self-guided experience. And we're also continuing with the expansion of our virtual suite of outdoor education program sessions. These are funded by our foundation's donations and the school board partner fees we receive. The Spencer Gorge reservation system continues to play a role in how this area will be operating. That pilot reservation system was implemented due to COVID as a means to address visitor management and provide a safe and equitable access process. Reservations are now going to be an ongoing part of the process for this year as we continue to evolve our operations for this area. The system we have found has eliminated most of the traffic congestion in the community and provides a parking spot and a positive visitor experience. And our partnership and collaboration with city bylaw and enforcement has been key to deter parking on the municipal roadways in the area. And I'd really like to give a thank you to Ward Councillor Vanderbeek for her ongoing support and her work with the Waterfall Motion Working Committee. Something we're quite excited to be launching finally this year after many COVID delays is roofed accommodations as part of our camping experience. 8 cabins will be available for rent later this summer. It's going to add to our existing 225 available campsites at Valens Lake. We believe we're the first CA in the province to offer cabins with the washroom, which you can see here, a little tiny powder room. We anticipate these are going to be very popular. We're currently finishing the last 2 accessible cabins, some outside structures, and landscaping will be happening in the spring. Now, as identified in our strategic plan, updates for all of our master plans is an important initiative. And over the coming years, updated guiding documents for all of our conservation areas will be completed. 50 Point will be finalized in 2022 in the first quarter, and we will begin work on the master plan for Salt Fleet and some of the surrounding Hamilton Mountain areas. And we're really thrilled that we officially opened our newest conservation area in 2021. The work is already underway on the first wetland, and a second wetland will be designed, and the design will be completed in 2022. And really, there's no better way to explain this project and the importance of how wetlands act as a natural sponge, storing water when it rains, and that positive impact downstream than with our very own Scott Peck as a narrator on a short 2-minute video that I'm pleased to share with everyone. So you may have to adjust your volume, but I did test it earlier with Stephanie and it seemed to be okay.
Hi, I'm Scott Peck. I'm the Deputy Chief Administrative Officer and Director of Watershed Planning and Engineering with the Hamilton Conservation Authority. We're at the Salt Fleet Conservation Area. It's a property that is about 268 acres in size, and today we are standing on our property off of First Road East in Stony Creek. The overall project is really looking at the creation of 4 wetland areas, and that won't be one big wetland, it'll be 4 separate wetlands within this area of Battlefield Creek and Stony Creek. This project got started flowing from an environmental assessment that was done in 2011 that looked at trying to address flooding and erosion issues below the escarpment in Stony Creek. What came from that EA was the potential to perhaps look at storage of water above the escarpment using natural means, and therefore addressing those flooding and erosion issues in the urban areas of Stony Creek below. And really what that means is that once all 4 of the wetlands are built, we will have the ability to store about the equivalent of 236 Olympic-sized swimming pools above the escarpment. And that, that water will eventually flow down and flow into Lake Ontario through Battlefield and Stony Creek. But the purpose of the wetlands for this project really then is that they will release that water slowly. So you won't get those peak erosion flows, those peak flood flows that come with it when water hits the landscape and generally just flows off. The wetlands will keep that over a longer period of time and slowly release it. And then, as I said, the benefit of those wetlands from that that nature's sponge, if you will. It also acts as excellent habitat for plants and a variety of amphibians, reptiles, and various bird species, as well as other mammals. The third aspect of the program is that the properties are located along the Dofasco Trail, a property that the authority manages. And what it allows for is for people to come to this site and to see these wetlands once they're constructed and to experience those natural lands.
Okay. Well, thank you for allowing us to show that video. Nothing speaks better, I think, than some pictures and the voice of Scott Peck narrating. So now we also have some projects and work to complete for the dams in our watershed this year. So for Christie Lake, a safety boom, some fencing and signage to educate and protect people from accessing some safety sensitive areas of the dam. That was initiated last year, will be finalized this year, and this is just a sample picture of what the boom will look like. Valens Lake will also see continued dam stability assessments and some safety signage this year. In terms of watershed restoration, our work here continues. We're going to be ongoing with our progress made from last year on our lands with removal, mapping, and updating our HCA invasive species strategy with over 17 different species managed. We're going to continue enhancing our natural heritage features across our watershed, and last year we planted over 4,700 native species. We also hosted 12 volunteer events last year with 308 garbage bags of trash collected. Our stewardship programs are also important. We continue to help private landowners protect, enhance, and restore natural areas and waterways on their properties. Last year, projects and grants included removal of 75 garbage bags of invasive species, decommissioning 4 abandoned water wells, and addressing stormwater runoff through downspout disconnection, rain barrel installation, and rain gardens. Now, in terms of our budget, we always start with operating goals when we compile our budget. And the first is that we require no greater levy increase than requested by City Council, that we operate on a balanced budget that's cash neutral or on a positive basis, and finally that all of our activities, our programs and services are designed to support our strategic plan. So this year, the budget levy increase is 2% as recommended by Council for boards and agencies. This breaks out between the City of Hamilton and Township of Puslinch, with the city providing 99.3%, or roughly $4.65 million, and the Township of Puslinch share is just over $32,000. So we do look to operate on a cash neutral or a positive basis. So this is where we project out both our revenues and expenses for the year. So our revenues are a combination largely of our self-generated revenues. We do have some intra-company equipment charges and revenues, grants and donations, and our municipal levy. Our expenses, the lion's share are our wages and salaries for our staff, but then we also have a number of other expenses, our fleet operation, repair and maintenance, facility operating costs, including utilities, third-party contracting, consulting, marketing, and promotion. So we are projecting to be in a positive position based on our increasing day admissions and camping as this pandemic continues. So we just have a chart here on our revenue composition so you can see it in a different format. You see levy makes up 35% of our revenues and self-generated makes up the balance. And on our self-generated revenues, we've broken these here all out, but you can clearly see the top 3 are our day admissions, marina, and camping. And then there are a collection of many smaller contributors ranging from grants and donations to permit fees, film shoots, among others. So in terms of some more detailed revenue highlights, as noted, we have projected that we will maintain higher levels of visitation as the pandemic continues this year to reflect a new plateau as we have experienced over the past 2 years. This is driven largely by day use admissions, expanded weekday use in camping, and some increases to our fees and permits. And we are budgeting that Wild Waterworks will operate this year. On the other side, we are projecting that school programs and events will not return to pre-pandemic revenues and our levels, and we have noted a decrease there. Now, if pandemic conditions improve and other recreation opportunities return, we may not meet all the revenue projections that we have here. And it's also important to note that these revenue projections are always contingent on good summer weather, as weather can be one of the biggest variables impacting our attendance and revenue. On the expense side, the bulk of our expenses, as noted, are related to people costs, with over 2/3 of our costs for staffing expenses. And those did increase this year with the inflationary cost of living, and that contributed to a larger increase this year than in previous years. We've budgeted for a significant increase in utilities and insurance costs this year, driven by rate increases. We're also seeing an increase in marina fuel and expenses related to upgrading our computers, our servers, and IT services for cybersecurity, and planning for continued remote and hybrid work. Now, we were able to reduce the maintenance and parts expenses for our equipment as we standardize our fleet of grass cutting equipment. Confederation Beach Park, we always like to include a slide here. This is owned by the City of Hamilton, but is managed by HCA by agreement. Now, the only monetary benefit to HCA is the management fee, calculated as a percentage of expenses. The general park area and the Breezeway Trail were heavily populated in the past 2 years, while the water park remained closed, as per the HCA and the City Park Management Review Team recommendation to City Council. For the purposes of preparing this year's budget, it has been assumed that the province will permit water parks to reopen and full operations will return. So all of the things that we're doing in this budget support our strategic plan, our vision and mission. It continues to direct resources to achieve these initiatives that are outlined. We are retaining some existing contract staff and adding a few others in areas of need in order to make these goals a reality. And in summary, we feel our budget provides in each area of our strategic plan sufficient combined revenues to meet expenses, adhering to the city recommended increase to levy, provides programs to maintain a healthy watershed and to help protect residents and property from flooding. We're addressing invasive species with some initiatives and continued development steps for the Salt Fleet wetlands. We will have a greater online and app-based technology presence in regard to our conservation areas and education programs. And we continue to work on providing vibrant conservation areas that connect people to nature. With that, we thank you for your continued support, and we'd be pleased to answer any of your questions. And as noted, I do have Deputy CEO and Director of Watershed Planning and Engineering, Scott Peck, and Neil McDougall available as well. Thank you.
Councillor Ferguson, I think you're muted. Still can't hear you.
Is that better now?
Yes, thank you.
Well, as always, Lisa, an outstanding job, and we're very proud of our staff, and particularly our CAO at the Hamilton Conservation Authority. Lisa, just before we go to the speakers list, we have a lot of KPIs at the Conservation Authority, and one of the key ones is the number of annual passes that we are able to sell. Can you give us, the council, a summary of how much our annual passes have increased during the last 2 years, particularly during the time of COVID?
Yes, certainly. Be pleased to the Deputy Mayor. Prior to COVID, we were sitting at around 6,000 annual passes. We were quite proud of that accomplishment. But over the past 2 years and at the end of last year, we actually have increased that to 12,000 annual membership passes that have sold. So we've doubled. The pandemic has done something that none of our promotions or other marketing programs has ever managed to do. So it's quite an accomplishment.
It is quite an accomplishment, and it's a great little KPI to see just how much the public is enjoying our facilities. To have in 2 years, mind you, it was COVID time, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens in 2022, but it certainly shows that the public is using these facilities and using them on a regular basis if they are purchasing annual passes. So I have a speakers list right now of, to pull this down a bit, Clark. Councillor Clark, I think you're up first. I'm just having trouble reading it. It's partly off the screen. Looks like Partridge and Powers. So
Wilson and Farr after that.
Okay, because I can't see them there. I'll get this fixed, but in the meantime, Councillor Clark, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Ferguson, and I guess I could say thank you, Chair Ferguson, because you're also the chair of the Conservation Authority, and you have been chair of the Conservation Authority through these tumultuous years with COVID. So, thank you for your service. Quick question to our delegates today on COVID. I believe you had an outstanding response with your employees in terms of getting their vaccinations and participating in the notification process. Do you happen to know the percent of how many employees actually were vaccinated?
Through the Deputy Mayor, 100% of our staff have verified their vaccination status, and we have over 99% of our staff are fully vaccinated.
99%. That's
over 99%.
That's an over 99%. That's a spectacular. So thank you for your leadership in that regard, Mr. Chairman. And I also want to thank Scott while he's here and thank him publicly. The Salt Fleet Conservation Area, the master plan for that is remarkable. People are very excited about it across the city, and I know Scott has worked really hard on it. We secured the support of the Heritage Green Community Trust with a $2 million grant for the construction of the first phase, which is fantastic. I want to thank the trustees to the Heritage Green Community Trust because they have contributed to this project, or they will have contributed over the next 4 years in grand total $4 million to secure the land and build this new conservation area. And of course, the city of Hamilton, we have contributed through our royalties $2 million so far for the purchase of land. And we are now working with the Conservation Authority in terms of the next phase, because of course it's going to cost us to build the next phase also, and of course doing that fundraising. So Scott, remarkable job, and my ward is very excited about this new conservation area. That'll be 3 conservation areas in Ward 9. And I just want to thank you, the board, and even my colleagues around this table for the support of that new project at the Salt Fleet Conservation Area. I'm very proud of what the Hamilton Conservation Authority has accomplished over the years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. And Scott, can you just explain to the council, you just recently awarded a contract for that area, the value of it, and are they underway now?
Yes, thank you. The work has the contract has been awarded, and they're out on site getting the layout of the berms and the wetlands in place and marking off the some of the buffer areas that are required, as well as the erosion and sediment control work. So they've been out there, I'm going to say, for just over a week. This weather will undoubtedly slow them down a little bit, but they are moving forward with things, and we're anticipating that the project, that first wetland, should be up and running by the end of May of this year. So we'll certainly keep things posted on our social media and with pictures as things progress, but should be done by the end of May.
And what's the value of that contract, Scott?
The contract was awarded at $2,020,000 to Oak Ridge Group, just in Hannon. They're quite close to where the project is.
Okay, so Councillor Clark, thanks for bringing that up. It is one of our major initiatives during 2021, and it's underway. So the next speaker is Councillor Partridge.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and welcome, Lisa and team. Excellent presentation. Lisa, could you speak to climate change effects, not only on the organization? You own a significant amount of property, which is really good to see. But I'm wondering if there's been effective climate change and the weather that we're dealing with, and also what the impact has been on the budget. Thanks.
Certainly, through the Deputy Mayor, climate change, can impact all organizations in multiple ways, as you know. So I think there's different lenses we can apply to this from our conservation areas. extreme weather does impact, our trail erosion and maintenance costs to keep everything in good repair. Ice storms and wind storms impact trees and our hazard tree work. So there's more work to be aware of. Changing temperatures can impact with invasive species, and you can see that we're doing a lot of work on mapping and monitoring and removing invasive species on our properties and what we could do for private landowners as well. So there are budget impacts to be able to keep up with all the maintenance and safety and to do the work on our lands and also with our private landowners. And then organizationally, something we will be looking at our own corporate climate change policies upcoming as well. And what can we do as an organization to reduce our carbon footprint?
So I appreciate that, Chair. In as a segue to that and following up, supplemental into the future. I'm sure that part of the conversations when you look at where do you see the areas, the weaknesses, perhaps that are going to require some capital expenditures for climate change going forward? Is there some obvious spots that look like they're going to need some capital investment?
Yes, thank you for that question. I may ask some of my companions here, Neil and Scott, to weigh in, but I mean, initially it's going to be, as I had mentioned, ongoing maintenance and risk management, to maintain our areas. Certainly we'll be looking at our dams in the future. We do have the two. We also have the Mineral Springs Dam, and we continue to monitor those and do assessments to make sure they're working properly. But I also think too, just the amount of lands we have, if we can add to that, and holding lands in their natural state can provide excellent benefits for climate change. And projects like the Salt Fleet Wetland Restoration Project, creating new wetlands, I think is going to be very important, and making sure the wetlands we have on our properties are functioning very well. Scott, I'd be happy if you have any other comments you could add on that.
Thank you, Lisa. I would just piggyback on what you've outlined there. Certainly, we're also doing some floodplain mapping work currently right now within our watershed. And for the current ones and the one we've done, we've asked them to address the impacts of climate change as part of that floodplain mapping. It's somewhat difficult because our floodplain mapping is based on the Hurricane Hazel event, and it's hard to map climate change, if you will, but we're still asking them to look into that as part of the development of those plans. Further, we've undertaken a lakeshore management plan for all of Lake Ontario within our watershed, including Hamilton Harbor. And as part of that, we're asking them to kind of look at the impacts of climate change. And specifically from the shoreline, I'll say it's perhaps a little easier because, with the milder winters that we're having, you don't have the same ice buildup and the same natural protections that happen to the shoreline. So we're asking them to look at that as part of that aspect of things. So I think we'll get not necessarily capital costs for the authority on those projects, but it'll help identify some of those at-risk areas on both public and private land. And then really, as Lisa has said, we do our dam and public safety assessments for all of our infrastructure to ensure that those are up to date and looking at those things. So I think in addition to what Lisa says, those were the other aspects that I would highlight. And as far as the capital budget or budget implications, I think they'll just, we'll look at them as these studies come into play and the results of those studies are known.
And Councillor Partridge, I should add that I'm sorry that we have actually spent considerable capital budget dollars in the past few years for shoreline erosion works at our 50-point conservation area. I neglected to mention that initially. That was in the hundreds of thousands of dollars to protect that shoreline and our property there.
No, and I appreciate that, Lisa, and Chair. The shoreline erosion is certainly something that even though it's outside of the Conservation Authority, down along the lakefront, has been a big issue. And we go to Valens every weekend. We hike a lot of the trails, not only for Hamilton Conservation, but for Halton, because most of Ward 15 is in the Halton Authority. But, you know, we certainly noticed the water level up at Valens is significantly lower this year. Just visually looking at it from last year, and I'm just wondering what the reason for that is.
Through the deputy mayor, I'm not aware of it being down. We do a watershed condition statement on a monthly basis that's reported to our board of directors, and from my understanding from that work, it's at where it should be typically for this time of year. But I can certainly follow up with our water resources engineer and confirm that with you. But to my knowledge, it should be in the area as where it usually is in the winter months.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. It may be in the area of where it should be in the winter months, but I'm wondering if there's, you know, if there's water being held back, perhaps at Mountsburg. But I would suggest it's down probably about 4 to 5 meters, which is a considerable amount. You know, the actual what do you call it, floor of Valens Lake in where the bridge goes over is totally exposed. There's no water on it. And that just seemed a little surprising to me. So if you would check on it, I'd appreciate that outside of this meeting. But excellent presentation. And I love the cabins at Valens. Really looking forward to getting those done. Westfield is fantastic for hiking. I don't know if people even realize there's hiking trails over there, but yeah, good job all around. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We next have Councillor Powers, former chair and current board member.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Lisa and Scott, please extend our thanks to the staff of the Conservation Authority for their excellent work. My question, Lisa, to you and Scott is that we know that changes have taken place or continue to take place with regards to the Conservation Authorities Act. How has our Conservation Authority evolved to meet those changes? Perhaps tell us what the changes were and how we've had to evolve to coming up to be in compliance.
I'd be pleased to, through the deputy mayor, this has been a bit of a process, of course, with MECP initially announcing or putting up proposals for comment and then finalizing them. So what has happened over the course of this year is we did have to undertake some changes to be in compliance administratively, as HCA had a history and legacy of having annual democratic elections. At our annual general meeting for the positions of chair and vice chair. So we did look at submitting exceptions to the MECP in that regard, which we were successful in achieving. We also did have to explain to MECP our unique local circumstances, that we only have 2 participating municipalities and only 1 member from that second participating municipality. So it would be very difficult for us to continually rotate. And again, we have had a history of annual democratic elections, which we supplied that information to MECP, and they also granted us an exemption in that regard. Now, those are temporary exemptions. They are not in perpetuity. They have to be reapplied every municipal cycle. We've had to update our own administrative and governance bylaws to represent these new changes from MECP. And then we've also had asked the City of Hamilton, our board passed a motion requesting that the City of Hamilton maintain the current complement of citizen appointments on our board, as changes to the MECP for the Conservation Authorities Act would now require 70% of the appointments to be councillors. In that regard, we would be losing 2 of our citizens, and an additional 2 councillors would have to sit on our board. So that is within the hands of the city. I'm not sure where that is at yet, what response they have received, but I can say that our second participating municipality, Township of Pushlinch, just recently were successful in obtaining their exception so that they could appoint either a councillor or a citizen to our board. Going forward, of course, we've passed a transition plan, and all conservation authorities have a tremendous amount of work now putting together their inventory of programs and services into the categories that MECP has compiled, and that really kind of, I think, if I could say, it turns all of our budget sideways, because that's not how we budget, but We are working on that, and we will be bringing that to our board of directors in February. And certainly we are working for a status quo budget, that we're not going to be asking for any further money. We're going to make sure that we have everything we need and it fits into the new categories that MECP is requiring us to list everything out in. I hope I've been able to answer your questions, and I'd be pleased to provide any further details if you had specific questions.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Move on now to Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Through the chair, good morning. Thank you for your presentation. My questions are just going to focus on your membership doubling from 6,000 to 12,000. Just wanted to know if you could offer us a profile of your membership in terms of demographics and where they reside.
Oh, thank you. That's a great question. I'd actually have to step back to our marketing staff to see what analysis they have been able to do. I do know that a great majority are residents within our watershed, but certainly we also have people purchasing membership passes outside of our watershed. But I don't have any further information in terms of if you're looking for specific areas, and if they're able to break that down further by age or any other information. I certainly could get back to you with that, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you very much. Continuing on your membership doubling, one of the concerns that has been shared with me is access. And if you're doubling the number of people, then the facilities, I suppose, to gain access to it might be a little busy. And through no fault of your own, when people were wanting green space during COVID, at some point, due to restrictions, they weren't able to enjoy it. So I was wondering if you could speak to your future and how you're strategically going to respond to ensuring that, regardless of where people live or how much they make, that they're going to be able to enjoy access to the properties. Thank you.
Through the Deputy Mayor, you've asked, I think, put a number of questions together, so I'll try to get at them one by one, and please let me know if I've missed anything. I'd like to start off, you addressed, the financial aspect, and we've held the cost of our annual membership pass for the past 2 years. We have not increased that rate, so trying to make that as affordable as possible, but we didn't want finances to be a barrier. And this year we've entered into an agreement with the Hamilton Public Library, the Township of Puslinch, and the Town of Grimsby, and we now have our passes available through the public library system that members can check out, and therefore have free access to our area. So we're very happy about that, to be able to provide that access. Now, in terms of just, I think you're getting at volumes of numbers of people coming in. Well, our one most popular area is the Spencer Gorge Conservation Area, and a reservation system will be ongoing in that area this year to help manage the visitation and ensure that we don't congest the community. There are parking spaces and a positive visitor experience. In our other areas, we haven't had that kind of pressure, but certainly our areas are busier. But we are also finding that people are spreading out, and there's more weekday visitation, not just on the weekends. So that does help us, and we're doing, through our marketing and communications department, everything we can to make sure people are aware of all the areas where we have green space and trails. And Councillor Partridge touched on Westfield. That is one we've been heavily promoting. It's not just a pioneer village. We do have a very nice trail network, and in fact, I'm hoping at this point next year, I'm going to be telling you we've expanded that trail network. We'll be promoting that. We've opened the Salt Fleet Conservation Area. We've opened another parking lot on the East Mountain for access to the Chippewa Rail Trail and the East Mountain Trail Loop owned by the city. Parking at times is one of our challenges, and so we are looking at all of our areas, and we do have some priority areas we're looking at for Tiffany Falls and aspects of the Dundas Valley, where maybe we can optimize the parking lots we have. And we also have looked at, can we have more people come by public transportation? But not all of our areas are accessible by public transportation. So we're looking at every way that we can to have people spread out and make sure they're aware of all the areas they can enjoy, and make sure with those passes through the library that the entry fee doesn't prohibit anyone from enjoying that.
Thank you so much. Yes, the passes through the library is just such a fantastic initiative. Very grateful for that. I was going to ask you about your views on accessibility via transit and other non-vehicular ways like bike connections, for example. And you have responded to that. I don't want to put words in your mouth, that you would hope perhaps in some future that those connections could be improved. So thank you for your time and your presentation this morning.
Councillor Farr, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm off the headset. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you great. It's our radio voice.
Good. I'll do my best to project. Lisa, hello, and thank you to all the staff and our board members as well with the HCA. Annually, we tend to gush following this presentation, and this year is no exception. This year, however, for me, it's interesting because I happened early this morning in reading my Hamilton Spectator, which is a morning ritual, with a cup of coffee, saw an editorial, and in your presentation happening on the same day, I just got to bring this up because it's a bit off-putting, and I'm having trouble squaring the editorial that I'm reading with all the wonderful accolades that you're receiving and justly receiving because of all the great stuff in your presentation today, as you do annually. So just with that, the opinion's author opens with concerns about development interest, but closes with, quote, "This isn't about pro or anti-development," end quote. So I'll actually leave that alone because I was a bit confused about that narrative. But it went on to say, the opinionator, quote, "It's about conserving what little nature we have left around us," end quote. This is in the Spectator, prime above fold kind of spot as an opinion piece from a regular author there. So I'm reading this today, and I have to bring it up. I wouldn't normally. In fact, it's very rare that I would do this, but I'm reading this, and it's on the same day that, Lisa, you're publicly presenting. We're adding 100. We have added 177. I think it was acres of nature in 2021 alone. We're opening new conservation areas that everyone's gushing about here today. We're making conservation areas more accessible. You're doing things to our wetlands to make them safer, to make them work more effectively, and even creating new ones. So I'm having trouble. Maybe you can help me square what I'm reading in the paper today, particularly the piece about what little nature we have left, and how that speaks to maybe undermining or not understanding the very effective, very successful work that we celebrate annually, not only in the budget process, but that is carried out 364 days a year. So I'm wondering if you'd like to speak to that through the chair.
Through the chair, these are opinion pieces appear in the Spectator on a variety of topics. I think we're very proud of the work we are doing at the Conservation Authority. Through the staff, and our annual report will be coming out with more details of everything we've accomplished in the past year. So I'm proud of the work we've done, and I can't speak for the chair, but he has been our chair for the past number of years, and he has been at the helm steering us through a number of these opportunities and challenges we have come across.
Yeah, I didn't mention the chair, but you did. I'll just say that, generally, if you see these kinds of successes, again, that we're all gushing about today, as we do annually, that shows an expansion of the great services that Hamilton Conservation Authority has provided us. That also means kudos to the board, and the board is generally led by a chair. So this wasn't really necessarily about defending the other theme of the opinion piece, but since you brought it up, it adds to my confusion. And while I really appreciate your answer, and I didn't expect you to want to get political, I just think that on the same day you present, that we'd see something like this, whether it's an opinion piece or not, I'm hopeful that the majority of citizens also have an opportunity to watch the presentation, to read your fuller report to come, and understand and appreciate that while, especially with the challenges in the last few years alone, but traditionally, the Hamilton Conservation Authority is doing unbelievably tremendous work that speaks to, creating opportunities opposite to what I'm reading about today with that opinion piece. So I just wanted to take a moment. I normally wouldn't bring this forward, but the timing was there to congratulate not only you, but the board led by Chair Ferguson. Thank you.
I appreciate those comments, Jason, and so thank you for that. Yeah, the numbers speak for themselves. Okay, let's move on to Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I certainly want to thank the previous speaker because I too wanted to comment about the article today and found it quite, I guess, ironic in a sense that it was here today, and certainly all of the great information that Lisa has brought forward to us, and kudos and congratulations to everyone for the tremendous amount of work moving the Conservation Authority forward, obviously. So it has not been an easy time, Mr. Chairman, as you're aware, dealing with COVID. It's been very, very difficult, but all of our staff, all of the services that are out there have certainly stepped up to the plate and just dug their heels in and said, nope, we're going to make this work and we're going to do this. And I'm really proud of that. Thank everyone. My question today, and I would be remiss if I didn't comment with regards to the update that's being done for the 50-point Conservation Authority. Lisa's shaking her head. So I'm just, I know I received numerous emails some time ago when this was commenced, and there was a gate that was closed on the side street that had access for residents to get through. I've kept clear because of the process that the Conservation Authority is involved in, because obviously it's not my call, but I'm hoping, and maybe Lisa, you can enlighten me, that as the report comes to fruition, will I be getting an update in the neighborhood with regards to the direction the Conservation Authority plans on going with 50 Point?
Yes, through the chair. Those community access gates were closed during COVID so we could better control numbers and visitation. And certainly through our public input process, we did hear from the community how important those were, and also the challenges along Baseline Road with lack of sidewalks and cycling lanes. So certainly we have incorporated that into the master plan, and certainly have made the city staff aware of that for any future transportation studies or upgrades to make sure that people can safely walk or cycle into our areas. And we will be looking at reopening those gates following the master plan, so we can reinstate that access either with the swipe card or other means to keep those active.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear that. And I certainly hope that, whoever's the author of the report, that I get an update as at the same time that it goes to the public would be greatly appreciated, or if a virtual meeting is going to be held, etc. And I want to thank you also for mentioning about the concerns of the traffic Baseline Road, because I'm very well aware of that. And certainly it is on my radar on how we can address it going forward. Obviously, it's the same as the Conservation Authority. It depends on the pot of money that's available. And I'm hoping to have some money available from the sale of city lands that will assist in us trying to address the shortfalls in that area for traffic calming and etc. I do want to also mention, because I know, especially when I was campaigning back in 2018, I had numerous requests for speed bumps on Baseline Road. And everybody knows I'm not a proponent and a supporter of speed bumps, but I certainly had a major concern of speed bumps when you have the major campgrounds there and you have a lot of camping families coming and going throughout the summer season. So I just want to ask, Lisa, what's your view of that? And I know part of your report, or the information I received, said something about looking at access coming in from the Grimsby side. I can't remember what the street's called on the other side, but the Grimsby side. And I do know that on the Grimsby side, I believe they have speed bumps almost every 10 feet on that roadway. So can you just maybe enlighten some information on your thoughts there?
I'd be pleased to, through the chair. Yes, certainly we're looking at our front entrance and how we can ease any traffic congestion or bottlenecks there. perhaps with a separate service entrance for staff. But we also know that the beach has become incredibly popular, particularly during COVID. So we have been having meetings and collaborating greatly, even bringing the chair down to meet the CAO of the town of Grimsby and the mayor to look at the Kelson Road as we do have I'll say an emergency exit that does have the potential to become a seasonal access gate so we can get some pressure off of Baseline Road, and that's on Kelson Road. Now, in terms of speed bumps, I'm not a traffic expert. Certainly, it maybe have traffic calming. 50-point camping generally is more seasonal, so we do have some big trailers coming through, and we have the boats coming through on trailers, so that could impact them. So I'm not the expert on that, however. So I really can't speak to that. I would think they'll still be able to get by, but I'm not an expert. They'll have to go very slowly. And I do anticipate we'll be receiving some feedback on if it's damaging any of their equipment. So it is something to be cognizant and aware of.
And you've just given another viewpoint of it, because my concern was the impact on the neighborhood as they go by, because that's an awful lot of heavier equipment other than a car or a 4x4 truck, and the noise and disruption it can create. But I thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, for certainly the great job you've been doing as the chair of the board as well, and to all the staff members.
Thank you, Councillor Pearson. Lisa and I did go down, as you said, and met with the mayor and the CAO about a second access to try to relieve some of that congestion. And they were very supportive of what we want to do. We're all both on the same page, and through the master plan process, we should be opening up that second access. Lisa, the street just escaped my brain. What street was that where they had the problem?
Kelson Road. Kelson Road.
Kelson Road,
some upgrades required to the culvert, but it's certainly something that appears doable.
But it's something that we're all on the same page with our neighbors in Grimsby. Okay, the next speaker is Councillor Vanderbeek.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Can you hear me?
Appears just fine.
I had a little technical issue here, and it asked me to test my audio, so I thought I better ask that question first.
It passed the test.
Before I go on eloquently, of course, and no one can hear me. Anyway, thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Through you to Lisa. I had a couple of questions. Generally, they've been answered. So what I would like to say is thank you for the presentation. It was great. But more so on behalf of the Greensville community, I want to thank you and Gordon Bruce and the staff for all of the work that they have done with me and on behalf of the community to manage the untenable at some points situation within the Greensville area. I want to say that the reservation system that we had in place last year in 2021 was very successful from a community point of view. It made the natural areas very accessible to everyone and anyone from anywhere who could go online from home, make a reservation, be assured of a parking space, and assured of a high quality visit without any adverse or without many adverse impacts on the very small rural settlement area of the community of Greensville, where Webster's Falls, Tews Falls, and the Peak are located. Having said that, I am grateful for the work that you have done with me, you and your staff, and the cooperative way you have dealt with the city and in our mutual interests. And so I would be remiss not to bring that up at this point. I'm looking forward to next year and seeing just what the impacts will be of any changes. It is an evolving situation there, and I appreciate the reactive way and the proactive way that you have dealt with that. So thank you very much on behalf of the entire community.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, it was a lot of work to get that sorted out. I certainly enjoyed the tour of Greensville that you gave me the day we went out there, and it was a problem, but our staff come up with this reservation system, and it's worked quite well. Councillor Jackson, another board member, welcome.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ferguson. Good morning. My apologies, colleagues, for being a little bit late. A number of snow calls to deal with this morning. We've got the best conservation authority and staff in the world, Mr. Deputy Mayor, and partly because of the three bureaucrats that are here before us today, our CAO Burnside and Director Peck, and outgoing Treasurer McDougall. And I just have some commentary, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I understand you recognize the outstanding tenure and talents of Treasurer McDougall, and I'm going to miss Neil very, very much, personally, politically, on behalf of the Conservation Authority. You know, finance people, Mr. Deputy Mayor, can often be dry because they are numbers people. They know their numbers inside out. They have their talents, degrees, expertise that they bring to the table to ensure corporations, public bodies and agencies like the city, and in this case, the Conservation Authority, are on the right track and pass any tests that are required in terms of transparency with the numbers. And Neil has just been outstanding, and he's got just a wonderful, personable way of presenting his financial reports every year as well. So for somebody like me, he makes it very easy and simple to follow exactly the status of the financial situation of the Hamilton Conservation Authority. Neil, I hope you won't be a stranger and will find your way to stick around in one way or the other. Mr. Deputy Mayor, I just want to say to my colleagues that may not be aware, the waterfalls issue, as we all know, became both a blessing and a bane for our community over the last, I'll say, 5 to 7 years. And in real quick summary, I want to thank CAO Burnside. I had set up, I'll call it an all-departmental, multi-agency players meeting. And back in 2016, when the number of rope rescues at Albion Falls had reached a level of almost 30 every summer, which was just ridiculous, sadly with 2 or 3 tragedies, fatal tragedies as well. Long story short, as you know, conservation authorities manage most of the waterfalls like Webster's Tools, Spencer Gorge in our area, Devil's Punch Bowl. But Albion Falls is a city owned and operated and managed waterfall. But yet the collaboration, which is most important, Lisa was at the table providing input, knowing what the Conservation Authority was going through as well at Webster's and Tools, access, stairways, closures, etc., trying to prevent people from being unnecessarily, carelessly exploratory in wanting to visit our waterfalls. And Lisa was just wonderful in being at the table with my bylaw, police, fire department agencies, paramedics, the Hamilton Burlington Trades Council representatives, NEC and others, our parks manager, Bunn, etc. So I want to thank her for that. And in the last 5-6 years, through both reservation system that the Hamilton Conservation Authority has implemented, like at Spencer Gorge, that has been most successful, both for impacts to neighborhoods and communities, as well as providing safe visitation to these prestigious areas of the city of Hamilton, these beautiful areas, but also at Albion Falls, with fingers crossed. Since the summer of 2017, there's only been 1 major rope rescue since that time. So even some of the restrictions that we put in at this time, as we're working on a potential proposed stairway access with an Albion Falls task force of citizens that are working with myself, Lisa, and city staff, it has been just a very productive and constructive working relationship between the city departments and Conservation Authority, primarily with Lisa. And as you know, it all connects in with the East Mountain Trail Loop all the way over to Felkers Falls and the Aramosa Karst Caves area as well. So, Mr. Deputy Mayor, my commendations to yourself, the board, and especially the 3 members of staff that are here and oversee the entire complement of human resources that carry out all the wonderful services at our conservation areas. And lastly, I want to say about Confederation Park. one of the tragedies, as we know, there were many human tragedies in terms of the lack of access and availability to do things these last 22 months. One of them was the closure of the water slide and the park amenities at Confederation Park. But to our staff's credit, they took that opportunity to upgrade the facilities, whether to paint the water slide, to do some maintenance, upgrade work, so that hopefully, fingers crossed, this summer, the Confed Park and all its amenities, including the most popular water slide, can reopen again to our citizens and visitors to our great community. So, Deputy Mayor Ferguson, it's been an honor and privilege to serve on the board, serve under your leadership, and again, tremendous thanks to the three executive team that are here with us today. Thanks, Deputy Mayor Ferguson.
Thank you. Very well said. So I think that exhausts our speakers list. Have I got that right, Madam Clerk? I'm just reading the chat.
Yes, you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, that's correct.
Okay, well, Lisa, Scott, and Neil, thank you very, very much for your presentation today. These three individuals are very important, but so is Gord Koski, who looks after all our conservation areas and all our construction guys. And we're so blessed with great staff. And we have a human resources manager, as Councillor Clark pointed out. We have a 99 point something percentage of our staff are fully vaccinated. So thank you for your presentation, and have a great day. I'm going to go back to the agenda now to 6.2, which is the Royal Botanical Gardens. And I think I saw Nancy is registered in now. If you're there, Nancy, can you turn your camera on, please?
It is on my end. Go. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I just can't see you.
I think it's on its way. Let me just double
Nancy,
check.
do you have your camera covered with a Post-it note or something?
No, it's just a different it's a wrong camera, so just let me switch it over.
Just while Nancy's getting that fixed up, Nancy is new to the Royal Botanical Gardens. I also sit on that board. And so she has taken over from a former CEO who retired after many years of service. And she comes from us from Ontario Place, where she ran that facility for a number of years and has an outstanding resume behind us. I think we've met once, Nancy. We've done everything virtually up till now. But welcome to our budget presentations.
Thank you.
I'll turn it over to you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And I also have Andrew Duncan joining me. He's on the phone. He's actually in person now. We were having some technical difficulties earlier on, so I apologize for that. I am going to, first of all, thank you for having us this morning. We're pleased to be here, and would also like to extend our thanks for your continued support of RBG. It's extremely important to the work that we do and to the future and our plans. And I look forward to sharing our business plan and our strategic plan and walking you through our budget and answering any questions you have. So I'm going to just share.
So Nancy, before you do that, I see Andrew is on. That's great to have you with us, Andrew. But I also have my roadmaps that Carrie Haynes and Emily Robertson is also going to be here. Are they with us also so we can introduce them?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt you. The floor is yours.
I'm having trouble with my camera this morning, so please bear with me. Just minimize this for a second.
Do you need help with sharing your screen, Nancy?
No, let me just, it's not picking up the entire screen. Just give me 1 sec. Stephanie, do you have a copy of it?
I can't upload it from here.
Okay.
Now.
Let me try again.
You have to hit the share button from WebEx when your presentation's full screen in the background.
It's connecting. So let's just see if that.
Nancy, if you like, we can move on to the next one and come back to you. If
Yeah, why don't you do that? Let me just figure out what's going on with this. I apologize for
you can
this.
sort out the technical difficulties. Maybe get your IT guys up there to give you a hand, and they're very helpful people these days. Okay, I'm going to move on then to item 6.3. We'll come back to RBG next. And this is Conservation Halton. And Hussein Bassett, CAO, will provide a presentation for the Conservation Halton. Are you there, Hussein?
Oh, Mr. Deputy Mayor, I do not see him in attendance.
I see
wait a sec.
Marnie's on. Marnie, is Hussein with you?
Marnie, you're muted.
Hassan was there, and I think he just stepped away when you called up Nancy. So,
okay, would you like to step aside then also? I'll go on to the next one.
yes, I've just messaged him to see if he's
okay.
Samantha, I'm going to get you to keep your camera off right now, please. So, Mr. Deputy Mayor, do you want to go to the Grand River Conservation Authority?
I can, unless it's imminent. So
they
Marnie,
are here. They had turned their calendars on.
I know. I saw the Grand River Conservation Authority is here. So I think, Marnie, if you can get a hold of us, and we'll come back to you after the RBG. We're going to got these technical problems. So let's move on now to the Grand River Conservation Authority and Samantha Lawson, the CAO, and Sonia Rajo, Manager of Corporate Services. Are you both here? There's Sonia.
Yes, can you hear me?
I'm just trying to see you on the grid. There you are. Now you just come up with the grid. Okay. Are you ready to go?
We are.
Okay, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. So we'll just get our presentation running. Okay. So I'll just confirm that you can see the presentation.
Yes, we can.
Wonderful.
See it, Sam. Thanks.
Okay. So thank you very much for this opportunity today to present GRCA's draft 2022 budget to the City of Hamilton. The Grand River Watershed is the largest in Southern Ontario, and the Grand River and its tributaries lie at the heart of one of the richest and fastest growing regions in our province. We know that the future prosperity of the watershed, its municipalities and communities, is linked to the health of the river, its tributaries, and the natural environment. The Grand River Conservation Authority operates a range of programs in engineering, planning, land management, recreation, and education. Our strategic mandate is to develop and implement watershed-based programs that protect people and property from flooding and erosion, improve the health of the watershed, connect people to the environment, and manage our land holdings in a responsible and sustainable manner. Our programs balance human, environmental, and economic needs so that we can deliver on our vision of a healthy watershed for now and future generations. Through the Memorandums of Understanding with the City, the GRCA provides technical advice on Planning Act applications and other planning documents. The primary objective of the Source Protection Program is to protect drinking water from contaminants and depletion. There is ongoing work to update the Source Protection Plan when new information comes available. Some of the examples would include new infrastructure such as new wells, update to technical analysis, changes to technical rules, and updates to policies and to help improve implementation of the plans. The Grand River Source Protection Plan will need to be updated to reflect revisions to the wellhead protection areas for the Frilton well system that the Hamilton-Halton Source Protection Region is currently working on. And this work is expected to be initiated in 2022. The Lake Erie region is continuing to work with the City of Hamilton Source Protection staff to help support source protection planning and implementation. The GRCA also delivers a voluntary rural water quality program on behalf of 6 upper tier municipalities in the watershed, which help farmers implement best practices to improve and protect surface water and groundwater. Each program is locally developed with input from the farming community, and variation in grant rates and eligible projects are tailored to reflect local priorities and budgets. Since 1998, more than 7,000 projects have been completed, with 20.8 million in grants provided and more than 57 million invested by municipalities and landowners. These investments support the rural economy and source water protection, building green infrastructure and climate change resiliency on the landscape, and help to improve the quality of the Grand River through varied projects. One example could be the decommissioning of old wells to help protect groundwater sources. The GRCA delivers a well decommissioning program on behalf of the City of Hamilton. Additional cost sharing funds is provided through the GRCA programs, and as funding for those programs are leveraged against federal and provincial initiatives, donations provided by our foundation and other environmental organizations. The GRCA monitors groundwater levels across the watershed. Of the 57 wells that the GRCA monitors, 4 of them are located within the City of Hamilton. The wells are equipped with instruments to measure hourly groundwater levels and temperatures and are sampled annually for chemical analysis. The data from these wells has become long-term data sets from which we can study the impacts of droughts and eventually will help us identify challenges with climate change on our local groundwater levels. We also use this data when reviewing Planning Act applications for academic studies and to help support our groundwater models in the drinking water source protection technical studies. We know that spending time in nature has a positive effect on people's physical and mental health. At the GRCA, we connect people with the natural environment by providing environmental education programs and access to outdoor spaces. A vital part of the watershed's recreational infrastructure, our conservation areas host over 1 million visitors each year and are an important part of the local economies. They're an important part of the local economies by paying property taxes, hiring local staff, and supporting the vibrant tourism community throughout the watershed. With increased populations, the demand for access to GRCA land has increased. Conservation lands or passive land areas located around the urban centers are ones that are experiencing a significant demand and attendance by the public. We are developing management plans for these areas to help identify both the environmental significant components of the properties and areas where the public is basically where it's suitable for the public to attend. We also enter into agreements with our municipal partners to help facilitate recreation activities on our property. So for the next component of the presentation, I'm going to pass it on to Sonia Radoja, who's going to get into more details regarding the 2020 budget.
Sonia here, can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. So the main budget challenges that we felt we were addressing this year is to prepare a budget prior to the release of all provincial regulations regarding mandatory, non-mandatory program delivery. And I'm highlighting the provinces looking at describing these as non-mandatory a little differently into categories such as municipally led requested programs and then other GRCA led programs. And the second uncertainty is to just manage, again, the COVID environment. And interrelated with COVID, I guess, is also just certain current economic conditions that, you know, we're dealing with in terms of inflationary pressures, supply chain pressures, and how that sometimes impacts, especially when you're going out for larger projects and doing RFPs, and sometimes costs aren't coming in as expected. Next slide, Sam. In terms of the first challenge, where we stand currently with the new regulations are that the phase 1 regulations, which prescribed the mandatory programs and services requirements, and the submission of a transition plan was completed by December 31st, 2021. The transition plan also requires us to develop an inventory of programs and services and enter into memorandums of understanding and other types of agreements with municipalities. And we are working on that inventory list. And also to help with that, really, there's a phase 2 regulations that are to be released and we haven't seen yet, which makes it somewhat challenging to work on the list. And finally, oh, sorry, Sam, back one more still. And we do have until January 1st, 2024 to complete the transition to the new budgetary framework. So in terms of how that impacts this budget is that we don't have, we're keeping the status quo budget. We'll continue to deliver our programs and services in place and fund programs with the general municipal levy formula as is in place now, as opposed to what will be in place starting in 2024. And that includes looking at our structure and the new requirements under the new regulations and what will be our staffing structure needs and will affect future budgets. In terms of managing on COVID, it's had impact in certain areas of our organizations, namely on our conservation areas. Now, in conservation areas, it's been a positive impact. We're noting extremely high revenue levels, higher than budgeted, and so that's a good news story there for us. In terms of, we offer an outdoor education program, and that has been contracted. It was offered to schools, community. We had day camps. We are restricting that program delivery to just our school contracts and primarily delivering that program on a virtual basis. Certainly, there are incremental costs related to having COVID in terms of supplies and equipment, and for us, somewhat transportation and putting protocols in place that just cost money. But also our discretionary spending is impacted by COVID, and we're realizing somewhat reduced costs there. Next slide. So overall, our budget right now is declining by $1 million. But if you look at the categories in which we've put our budget, our operating expenses are in fact increasing by about 2.5%. Capital is holding status quo, and special projects is significantly lower than the final budget last year. And I do expect the 2020 amount to come into line with last year's. It's just a matter of timing when we incorporate those projects into our budget. So it's really driven more by the special projects which not have been finalized yet. Next slide, please. So our operating budget is basically maintaining the programs we currently deliver, represents about 25 million, or about 80% of our budget, and includes all these program areas that Sam spoke to earlier. Next slide. Our water budget, our capital budget is about 3.7 million, primarily these areas. Next slide. And again, the breakdown would be for our major control structures, about 1.5 million, but that's subject to fluctuate. We have carry forward projects from prior year and new projects that have emerged since this draft was prepared. Similarly, with the park capital, there's 1.5, and that's subject to change too. The main thing being here that these increases to these budgets does not affect the request for general levy. We fund fluctuations with our reserves when we have added demands to in these project areas. Next slide. And as mentioned, the special projects areas only stands at 1.5 million at present, but I expect that to jump to close to 3 million by the end because we have ecological restoration projects, we have some other type of rural water quality projects, and we have in particular quite a bit of funding coming forth for floodplain mapping that we'll be incorporating into the final draft. There were some new funding envelopes approved in the last year through the NDMP program. This slide simply serves to highlight that municipal levy represents about 40% of our funding for the budget, and that we have almost 50% of our revenue is self-generated. And finally, the budget has overall built in a levy increase of 2.5%, which then gets apportioned amongst the various participating municipalities. And this has come out that Hamilton's is in line with the overall average at 2.5%, or just over $1.5 million. And another way of perspective that we present in terms of our program's delivery is what it represents in the cost per capita in the watershed, which is over 1 million people, and it translates to about over $11 per person. And that presents the formal part of our presentation. We're prepared for questions.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. And I see nobody on the speakers list. And so thank you very much for coming in and doing your presentation to us today. Okay, we'll move on. We'll go back now to the RBG if Nancy and Andrew Duncan are ready. Are you ready to go, Nancy?
I am.
Okay,
my video's just turning on.
Okay.
And
if you need more time, I see that Conservation Halton is here now. We can move on to them if you like.
Can you see
Oh,
them?
there we go. It's up. There we go.
I'm not sure if you can see me yet, but the presentation is
Yeah, we
there.
can see you.
Okay, fantastic.
We're good.
Oh, perfect. So good morning and thank you for bearing with us this morning with the technical challenges that we've been having. So I'd love to walk you through our presentation and our plan for the coming year, and happy to ask any questions.
Can you expand your presentation? I see a lot of...
Are you seeing it expanded yet?
It's starting, I think. Didn't expand. Okay, there it is. You got it.
Display setting. Okay, just let me know if it's advancing for you
okay.
as I move forward.
Okay.
Okay. Oops.
There you go. It's advancing.
Perfect. It's advancing too far.
Yes, way too far.
Okay, so I'm going to take you through our 2021 interim results up to the end of Q3. And for us, Q3 is September 30th. We're just finalizing our year end as we speak. Walk you through our 5-year strategic plan, which is the evolution of our master plan, 25-year master plan that we talked about last year's presentation. And then we'll walk you through our 2022 business plan and budget and highlight some of the initiatives that we're currently working on with the city and initiatives that we'd be happy to explore further with the city. In terms of interim results, we've been talking about COVID recovery since it started in 2020, but in fact, through 2020 and 2021, we've been trying to deal with COVID survival while at the same time planning for COVID recovery. Despite all of that and the challenges, 2021 was really our first full year of COVID operations, and I think that's important to highlight. When we started in 2020, our first 2.5 months at the very least were typical of our operating scenario. So 2021 represented the first year where we saw a full year of reduced use of the site, different periods of lockdown, and we've had more lockdown days in 2021 than we did obviously in 2020. Despite all of that, we continue to see some positive results year over year in a number of areas. Our philanthropic support through our donations continued to be very, very strong. Support from our community, especially as it relates to COVID recovery, was important to us. Memberships remained strong and performed better compared to 2020. And that support has been critical to us. We have about 11,500 member households, and that has remained steady through the pandemic for us. Admissions is our paid admission to our garden areas. That was slightly below the previous year. And again, that is because we didn't have even a partial winter exhibit in 2021. It was completely closed because we were in lockdown. Retail continued to perform strong for us. F&B shows us performing better, but it is because we changed our food services model in June of 2021, and we took over food service operations. Prior to that, we had a third party provide us with food services. What that means is our revenues have grown, but so have our expenses. But we're projecting by the end of the year we'll be in a good position on our F&B year one, which is in this circumstance is a positive sign. Rentals, which is our rentals, continue to perform strong. One of the things we have seen is a continued demand once we are out of lockdown, and as soon as capacity limits are increased, we see a huge demand for space, both from our wedding and our social business, but also our corporate bookings. Programs were strong, predominantly led by camps. Summer camp program extremely strong. Our virtual programs were really well attended this year. Obviously, in-person inside education market has not come back in 2021 and will likely be one of the slower markets to come back for us. Special events were showing slightly below last year, but we did have a strong Winter Wonders run this last little while, so we're quite optimistic where we'll end the year. And we changed our parking model, and we started to optimize our parking in our paid existing lots, and that's where we see that spike in revenues coming. In 2020, we had about a 50% self-generated versus non-self-generated, and non-self-generated is our funding that we receive from the City of Hamilton, Halton Region, and the province. 2022, that is going to be 62% self-generated revenue versus that's not self-generated. And that starts to bring us back to more normalized numbers in terms of where we've been the past few years. In terms of retention rate, I mentioned memberships continue to be strong year over year. Our retention rate has been strong. The number of memberships is in and around just shy of that 12,000 number. The number of volunteers is down year over year, but the volunteer hours is slightly ahead, and that's just related to COVID. Individuals who were prepared and ready to come back and volunteer, and those who are a little bit more concerned. Guest experience continues to be strong for us. What we saw is continued use of the natural lands, the trails, high usage of those areas. The gardens themselves have been a little bit slower to come back. They've been in a lockdown situation in 2021, much more so. The natural lands areas remained open throughout that period of time. Our customer service satisfaction, the top two, extremely satisfied and satisfied, makes up about 95% of the overall feedback that we got, and our experience as being excellent or very good is about 82%. In terms of the number, from a science and horticulture perspective, the number of species that are in our collection that continue to be part of the international global conservation of nature experts are shared here. In terms of our conservation efforts for this past year, we actually shifted in 2021 from where we thought we were going to be as it relates to some of the projects. The Coots Paradise Marsh, the water levels were the lowest that they've been in quite a few years. So what that allowed us to do is to do more planting along the shoreline and in the marsh throughout the spring and into summer. And we're seeing the results of that currently in both Coots and in Grindstone Marsh. We had a lot of activity in terms of managing invasive species, both at Princess Point and throughout the natural lands with the support of our volunteers. And we've also had a lot of projects that were as a result of extreme weather, whether that be wind or rain. And we've had a fair bit of that, especially through September and into October, where we saw some significant impacts on slope stability in a few of our sites. Our environmental stewardship is a work in progress for us. We're seeing slightly better year over year on our GHG emissions. That's somewhat being driven by a warmer winter last year, but we are also having a lot of internal conversations currently around our future goals and standards, and we'll be coming back with more information in that as we develop those plans. The other, or the main focus for us this year really was the development of our 5-year strategic plan. The 25-year master plan was developed and approved by the board in May 2020. The goal now was to develop a 5-year strategic plan that starts to deliver on those priorities identified in that master plan. And so the development of this plan is really focused on a 5-year rolling strategic plan so that we don't find ourselves in a situation 4 years from now looking at developing a new strategic plan. So annually, the plan will be reviewed. It will be modified and it will be extended by a year in order to ensure that we maintain momentum and continuity of our initiatives. So 5 strategic priorities. The first one is planning for the future, and that is really commencing implementation of the 25-year master planning framework. And we've identified that we need to finalize priority projects for the first 5 years and do some additional investigation and assessment of those to make sure that they are the projects that are going to be most beneficial to RBG, not just in the short term, but also the long-term success of RBG. We also, as part of that planning for the future, need to undertake a fairly substantial fundraising campaign in order to enable us to deliver on this master plan. The second priority is leadership in biodiversity and ecological stewardship, and that is our core mandate. And through the management of our natural sanctuaries and through our gardens, and with our science and education programs, our objective is to increase awareness of environmental issues and sustainability practices through the engagement and communication of science-based information, and let people understand their connection and the importance of plants, people, and plants to people and to cultures. The third priority is excellence in experience and visitor engagement, and this is about how do we grow our attendance through the development of compelling and diverse, accessible and engaging visitor experiences that are focused on our core mandate of science and education, our horticultural displays, our collections, but also how do we start to integrate even more cultural activities to draw visitation and create connections to our visitors. Fourth is our strong culture and strong team, which is about building an inclusive and diverse team. And when we talk about our team, we're talking about our staff, our volunteers, and our board. And we want to focus on a culture that supports the achievement of both our short and our long-term goals. I think COVID has taught us the importance of being nimble and being able to adjust as the world around us changes. And that's a really important indicator of success for RBG going forward. And last but not least is financial resilience and growth. And so we've made a commitment to grow our revenue sources and our revenues to support our biodiversity programs and to create more visitor experiences and increase our visitor engagement. We have traditionally relied on our reserve funds to fund operating deficits, and we've established goals for ourselves to eliminate our reliance on reserves and to start generating positive revenue back into the organization. In terms of the 2022 business plan and budget, so our focus for the next 12 to 18 months is really to balance our stewardship and conservation activities while delivering enhanced visitor experiences and programs and delivering the master plan framework. So as an organization, we spend a lot of time talking about how do we continue to maximize our efforts currently while at the same time thinking about our future and advancing those priorities. Addressing COVID recovery is an absolute must for us in order to drive visitation and revenues. We are not currently, when we look at our attendance in our garden areas, we are not back to where we were pre-COVID. So there's a fair bit of work that we have to do there. We see that our attendance is growing in our natural lands, and obviously we're trying to balance that impact on those areas. So that's all part of managing our COVID recovery. We want to undertake the appropriate level of due diligence on the master planning framework in order to inform our decisions. And we also have committed to reviewing our organizational structure and our business processes to increase both effectiveness and productivity. Considerations when we were developing this year's business plan and budget was one, to make sure that it ties back to our strategic plan and to our master plan, and it does. We looked at, we have some strengths, we have some challenges, we have opportunities, but we also have some threats. We know one of our real strengths is that size of our local market and our surrounding market provides tremendous opportunities for growth for us. However, in some of our local markets, our conversion rate is really low. They are aware of who we are and what we have to offer, but that doesn't necessarily convert them into visiting. Having said that, we also have better data on our gardens than we do on our natural lands. So one of our commitments this year is to get better demographic data on our natural lands to be able to inform our business decisions going forward. We have a connection to important and relevant issues, whether it's climate change, whether it's conservation, whether it's education, latest science, topics of conversation. And we feel strongly that we have an opportunity to really create a dialogue and be a place for dialogue to help people get real and relevant information as it relates to these important issues. We have a strong membership base, which means that we have a high level of support, which has been evident and very much appreciated, especially through the last 2 years. And we're an important part of the local ecosystem. So what we do at RBG has a direct connection to what's happening in Hamilton, in Burlington, and our surrounding areas. We understand the importance of, if we have a strong and vibrant offer, we have an opportunity to support the tourism market, to help support economic development and growth through creation of quality of life experiences. So an important role to play there. We want to focus as we go forward, becoming a true 12-month destination. So not just simply being open 12 months, but actually driving visitation across 12 months. We also want to reach new audiences through activations, through extended hours, through partnerships. And we want to focus on diverse target audiences. There's a lot of diversity in the communities that are around us. We want to partner with a lot of those different communities to create experiences and create connections back to RBG. So in all of that, we've identified 4 things that we're going to focus on in 2022. COVID-19 recovery. So that will be through different programs that we initiate to increase visitation. It'll be through increasing revenues through high opportunity areas like sales and food and beverage and parking. Implementing and making progress on implementation of the master plan is the other focus for us. Obviously, our leadership in our biodiversity and ecological stewardship. So it's all our education programs, our conservation initiatives, management of our collection. As I had mentioned, we are going to focus on how do we continue to maximize our virtual experiences, and how do we start to bring school groups in particular back to in-person experiences at RBG. And organizational effectiveness. As I'd mentioned earlier, both structure and business processes are areas we're going to focus on this year. In terms of our budget, the detailed budget was included in the package that you received. Our sources of support for 2022 from the different levels of government are just $5.5 million, or just over $5.5 million. There's operating revenue of $8.6 million, development and fundraising, which also includes our memberships, of $3.6 million, and other sources of funding, which that profile has changed over the past couple of years. So when you look at 2019, we moved funds from reserve to the tune of just over $1.3 million. In 2020, we had CEWS funding to help us with our payroll, and we continue to have a bit of CEWS funding to the tune of 1.1 in 2021 is what it's forecast to be. And we've received some emergency stabilization funding for 2022 from the province. In terms of our expenses, they are slightly above those revenues to the tune of 19.4 million, resulting in a net position of a loss of 95,000. But there's money that we received for COVID recovery, which we will apply to this year's budget, and we'll have a net position of 310. In terms of initiatives, I just want to highlight that we're currently working on with the city or would like to explore further. So the Shadow Creek remediation continues to be a key initiative, and Tice on our team has been working really closely with the city team, and there's been a really good dialogue and a good sharing of information, and I think we're making good progress, and we're going to be meeting shortly talking about some next steps and some communication strategies. Old Guelph Road is something that we spend a lot of time talking about at RBG, in particular, the amount of traffic on that road and the speed in which people drive, and it intersects the trail system and is a challenge for pedestrians. So it's an area that we want to explore around some opportunities on Old Guelph Road. Wildlife corridors, land acquisition, land swap are conversations that are happening at the Coots Escarpment Eco Park System table, but there are also conversations that we're having at RBG. The development of a land acquisition strategy is a priority for us. It's one of our deliverables in terms of preparedness for the master plan. And then any work that we can do to support the city priorities. I know we've been part of conversations on the Commonwealth Games and obviously the Shadow Creek remediation, but any other initiatives, we're happy to continue to work with the city. And thank you for your time.
Okay, Nancy, thank you very much. You just take your presentation down so I can see the grid. Thank you. And just going to go to the chat and Councillor Wilson, I think you're the first up.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the RBG members who are here. I think the RBG is a jewel in our crown, and I think we need to do all that we can to advance its core mandate. And one of those, one of the priorities, which Nancy alluded to, is leadership in biodiversity and ecological stewardship. And just speaking personally, as a mother of 3 children who grew up in the RBG, those lessons that were hands-on are still with them. And I know they will take those with them on the journey that is in front of them. And I've also enjoyed that both as individually and through them, that hands-on learning. And I don't think there's anything that can compare with that, whether you're, sitting in a marsh planting vegetation or listening to about the role of the winter solstice in the role of nature and what it does to the world around us. So from this mother, thank you very much. And from this resident, thank you very much. And I'm, of course, very pleased to see you underscore it for the rest of us and those who are listening. Its continued importance as part of your mandate. There's just 2 items that you referenced that I'd like to focus on, and it is something that I referenced with the Conservation Authority. So you mentioned as one of your challenges that you're easily accessible by vehicle, but not necessarily so by transit. And could you speak to that and also its relationship to your efforts to diversify your audience? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. That continues to be a challenge. Easy access by bus to some of our properties is possible. Easy access to others is a challenge. We've explored having a people mover system, and we've had it in place in the past pre-COVID to help support that and improved bike access. And that's one of the conversations around Old Guelph Road. It is people who are trying to access the Arboretum and the trail system that is in the Arboretum. Once you get off the bus on York Boulevard and try to navigate your way, or if you're riding your bike, there is no pedestrian or enough room for bikes and vehicles to exist in that space. And that's one of the areas we want to explore to see how we can resolve that issue. That's one of the ones that's most striking for us.
Thank you. That's excellent to hear you speak to that, and the fact that you, of course, have clearly identified it both as an opportunity and for the rest of us as a responsibility. Could you speak a little bit further to your efforts to diversify your audience and why you think that's important and part of your core mandate? Thank you.
It's diversifying our audience is essential to our long-term growth, and learning more about our audience is essential. As I mentioned in the presentation, we have a better understanding of who visits our gardens, where they're coming from, how far they're traveling, and their demographic and socioeconomic information. We don't have as good a handle on our natural lands or in our on our trails, and it's an area that we want to explore further. Making sure people have a connection to RBG and have the opportunity to experience nature and learn about nature is an important part, not only in terms of their personal well-being, but also as their role as citizens and their role in addressing the issues that we're all facing. And so we think we have an important role to play in that. One of the things that we want to do this year is improve our intelligence on who is visiting, especially in our natural lands, to understand how do we create experiences that are diverse and use those experiences to introduce people to our spaces. And secondly, how do we identify gaps that we currently have in terms of our offers, or how we deliver experiences, or how we communicate to make sure that we're as inclusive as we can be.
Thank you. And just in closing, Mr. Chair, I'm sure folks have witnessed the number of skaters who have been enjoying the natural beauty that is in Coots. And therein lies the balance of the RBG. And I'm always delighted by the value system that drives you, because there's a ton of people down there. And regrettably, some of them do significant damage to the ecology in and around that area. But still, the outstanding attitude of the RBG continues to be welcome. And how do we make this work? And I just think that's such an outstanding and refreshing approach to acknowledge the challenges, but the first instinct is to welcome. So on behalf of those who are skating, including Ward 1 residents, who are also having to, are a little bit of challenge with the parking issues, but thank you for that. Those are my questions.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor. And Nancy, we have no other speakers on the speakers list, so thank you for your attendance today. I know this is your first presentation, your first time before us, and I think you did an amazing job and brought everybody up to speed. I don't want to let this time go by, though, without recognizing the Andrew Duncan's contribution to the RBG. His financial stewardship through the COVID times was outstanding, and he kept us above the waterline somehow. And when most of our facilities were closed for an extended period of time. So Andrew, on behalf of council, I'd like to thank you also for your contribution. And Nancy, also thank you for your the elephant in the room, Shadow Creek, for suggesting that it's a very difficult issue. But thank you for recognizing that you have a good working relationship with our staff and that you're going to work together. We're not going to be shooting arrows at each other. We're going to find a solution to this thing together. And I'm pleased our staff is doing the same with you. So with that, I think that we're finished, and thank you for your contribution today. I'll now move forward to go back to the Conservation Halton. And Hussein Bassett. I think I'm mispronouncing that though. Saying the CEO will provide the presentation for Conservation Home.
Good morning, and thank you, Chair Ferguson, and all members. It's nice to be with you this morning. If you allow me a few minutes, I will bring up my presentation. As I do that, just want to introduce our Long-Term Director of Finance, Marnie Piggott, who's also on the call with me. Okay. If you can just confirm that you can see the presentation.
Yes, we can see it fine. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll begin my presentation as I normally do by focusing on the finances, the budget, and then as I go through, talk a little bit about the impact that Hamilton's support over the previous year and many years prior to that has had in terms of the impact of our programs. To begin with, I'll just take a brief moment to mention that we completed our new strategic plan. It's called Momentum. I do encourage you, if you're interested, to take a look at it. This is the second plan that I've had the privilege of completing with our board of directors and with our staff and stakeholders. And you can see on your screen our top 4 priorities, quite simple: natural hazards and water, science, conservation and restoration, education, empowerment and engagement in nature and parks. And then below them, you see what we like to call our enablers, our enabling priorities, which if we focus on them well, we'll be able to serve the public in terms of our top priorities even better. In terms of some of our priorities for 2022, they continue to focus on infrastructure improvements, our asset management plan, our dams and channels, our other facilities and buildings, both ones that are supported by municipal tax levies and those that are not. I also want to talk a little bit, and we're continuing to focus on digital transformation. You heard from a lot of the other CAs how they've also been using technology for park access and data management and other things, and CH has been doing just that, and it's something we're going to continue to focus on. It's actually one of the key priority areas in our strategic plan and has been for the last 5 or 6 years. Conservation area expansion, I think, is getting to be a bit of a theme with a lot of the agencies that are here, and it's a reflection of the interest in green space and also the importance of having foresight planning to serve our communities and ensure that we can maintain service levels and access to green spaces as our communities continue to grow. Floodplain mapping, and I'll talk a little bit about this towards the end. The CA Act, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have in my capacity as being involved with the working group that the province has formed. And finally, watershed climate action is one of our key priorities for next year. So to begin with, our overall budget is just over $40 million. This is both the operating and the capital. It's driven by compensation, inflationary increases. Our proportions of compensation salaries is not different to those that were presented by Lisa earlier on. We're seeing significant increases in expenditures across the board, but mainly driven by insurance, legal expenses, inflationary increases, all of that. Some program enhancements to meet strategic plan objectives. So it's not just a budget that we've prepared that allows us to maintain status quo. We also want to continue to serve our growing community. And so there are investments in areas that need investments. And of course, our parks recovery from COVID impacts. We don't use any municipal levy dollars for our park programs, operating or capital. And that means that when the economy goes through a shock that COVID has put, we're exposed to it just like any other business would. To put it in context, the disruption to last year's ski season resulted in almost a $6 million loss in revenue for CH, and we've had to work very, very hard over the last 12 months to mitigate that deficit. And we've been able to do that. It took us all the way into December, but we were able to recover from a $6 million loss in revenue. Our municipal funding increase is at 3.5% for this year. The Region of Halton provided us with a guideline of 3.7%. the budget allows for continued investment in both capital assets as well. To look at a breakdown between operating and capital, and how the amounts change from year to year, you'll see that we have an operating budget in 2022 of just shy of 33 million, capital budget just shy of $7 million, and then our state of good repair levy, which is something that we worked on 3 or 4 years ago, and have a funding strategy to fund that. We always show that as a separate line item to ensure that there's transparency on how we're putting money aside to ensure that our dams and channels, which are more important today than they ever were, continue to be maintained in a state of good repair. In terms of our sources of funding, you can see from this slide, municipal funding makes up 27% of our overall budget. It's amongst the lowest percentages in the province, if not the lowest. And then you can see the other sources of revenue. The percentages are at the bottom. So our own program revenue is at 43%, although the internal chargebacks and recoveries are part of that as well. This is where some of the surpluses that are generated at our parks are actually, it can go to offsetting some corporate expenditures and other positions. And that amount, I believe, if you're interested, you can see it there, about $1.6 million in chargebacks to what may normally have been municipally supported programs. And then some smaller funding pots, which are variable. You can see the provincial contribution there, and other funding is grants and things like that. We receive our apportionment data from the Ministry of Natural Resources, and that's applied. And once that's done, you can see how the increase between last year and 2022 shapes up between all of the funding municipalities, as well as a percentage of budget that each of our 4 municipal partners funds. So percentages are great, but actual dollars as well, just to back it up. Our municipal funding for 2021 was just shy of $10.5 million. You can see the increase driven by compensation and inflation and other costs. Increases driven by state of good repair levy. Some of these were offset by internal efficiencies, which results in a total increase of total operating municipal funding of just shy of 10.8 million. Of that, Hamilton's increase is $26,000, and that, of course, is across the $40 million budget. Shifting gears to some of the external drivers, I won't dwell on these. I'm sure these are pretty standard for all public agencies these days, but these are some of the areas that drive what we pay attention to. I also want to just briefly show our 10-year, or at least our forecast for the next few years. And it's reasonable, you know, when you're in the 2 to 5% range, we usually have the ability to bring it down quite a bit. I believe the forecast initially for 2022 was 5 or 6%, but we're able to bring it down to 3.5%. So we're not forecasting crazy amounts, and I'm pretty sure we can bring these down as needed. In terms of some of the program impacts, I've done it a little differently this year. Normally, I present you the overall statistics of what Conservation Halton has done, but I've actually broken out Hamilton this year, because even though on a map, you may, or given our proportion of our budget, you may think Hamilton is a very small part of CH, or CH is a very small part of Hamilton. In terms of our focus and impact, it's actually, that's not the case. And it's maybe one of the good byproducts of CH focusing on watersheds, where in fact a disproportionate amount of investment has continued to go into Hamilton by Conservation Halton when you compare all the municipalities and what we invest there. So just in the city of Hamilton, in the last 12 months, you can see the stats there. 15,000 square meters of wetlands were created, close to 18,000 trees and shrubs planted, 3 wetlands, invasive species management, over 14 hectares of land restored, and several kilometers of stream creek bank improvements. In total, our staff carried out 29 restoration projects in Hamilton, and that is really a testament to our staff and the partnerships that we established both with the city of Hamilton, the city staff, and other groups, agencies, and citizens of Hamilton. To be able to deliver something like that in 12 months under a pandemic is, I think, just a real success story for everybody in Hamilton. The total value of those projects was $1.5 million. So that's what we invested in Hamilton in the past year. I'll highlight a few because they'll be familiar to some of you. One of them was the Flamborough wetland project, where it was really an underutilized community space. We don't own this property, and we worked with the city to work on these. You can see the stats there. I won't go through all of them. What's really important here, and in the next two slides, it isn't just the outcome of number of trees or, it's actually the engagement that underpinned arriving at these outcomes, which was with the community. So a lot of these were done through numerous volunteer planting sessions, monitoring sessions. I think 7 maybe in this case, 12 in the case of the project that's coming up on the next slide. And that's strategic, and it's intentional, because I think it is important for us to showcase and engage the communities who either live around these areas or have an interest in visiting them, to really bring them out and involve them in the work that's being done, not just the planning, but actually the implementation of it as well. And eventually that's that belief of future stewards and future stewardship. And so just again, hats off to all of the staff, including the city staff, who were willing to put in the extra effort to do it that way, to do it with volunteers and events and engagement. And you can see the total number of volunteer hours right there at 412 that went into this project. The other project we worked on was the Courtcliffe Park Restoration Project. And again, you can see the impact of that. Over 7 volunteer work days, 150 trees, many of them provided by City of Hamilton. And again, lots of work. This has been a multi-year, multi-phase project to provide a better space for Hamilton residents to be able to use, and at the same time mitigate environmental impacts such as flood attenuation, better water quality, better stream habitat, and management of invasive species. And lastly, we worked on Joe Sam's Park through a stewardship project. Again, you have this presentation, so you can go through the details. And if you're interested, or this happens to be in your ward and would like more information, please feel free to reach out. Again, appreciate the partnerships that allowed CH to propose this project and then execute it, work on it, and actually deliver a really neat result. Again, sustainable space for community use in Hamilton. Our education programs, as you heard from RVG, as you heard from Hamilton, we pivoted to online. Normally, we would be hosting about 75,000 students at Crawford Lake and Mountsburg. Those are our 2 education parks. Mountsburg is in Hamilton. We haven't been able to do that in person, obviously, and so I still think this is a fairly significant online engagement through school groups, over 10,000 students through various groups and school boards, and lots of programs developed. And if there's one learning out of this, it's there is an advantage to offering these kind of online programs related to nature. They do, in many cases, increase accessibility for students or schools that may not be able to visit in person. And so we want to very carefully ensure that we do not basically abandon all of these digital tools as we go forward. Yes, we want people, students and kids, to come out and have those tactile experiences in our parks, but there's a place for virtual as well, and it can expand the reach and the accessibility. So that's what our team is really working on, is ensuring that as we get back to normal, that it's that we retain some of the good learnings from the last 18 months. In terms of our parks, the images you'll see across the top demonstrate some of the breadth and diversity of our programming, and this is actually quite deliberate by CH and our board of directors. We launched an equity, diversity, and inclusion initiative last year, and we're working through that, and it's meant to be a very wholesome, multi-layered, multi-year project which looks at our barriers to engaging, diversifying communities, our programming, our ability to look at diverse business operators when there are opportunities, whether it's food and beverages at our parks or entertainment, and then also try and work with and learn and understand our community a little bit better and ensure that it's a programming that's reflective and that every person that lives here today can see themselves in Conservation Halton's programs, can see themselves whether it's skiing or canoeing or rock climbing or walking on trails. And I'm quite proud of the work that the team has done so far this year. And I'm looking forward to how we continue to do that. I'll draw your attention to one example, the new Canadian Ski and Snowboard program with in partnership with the Canadian Tire Foundation. Is just a fantastic program to work with new Canadians, new immigrants who may be experiencing their first winter, perhaps their first snowfall yesterday, and working with them to make sure they're comfortable coming out and trying skiing, and a lot of our other programs as well. On the right, you'll see our visitation. It's actually not 1.3, it's 1.5 million visitors to our parks. It's an exponential increase over the last 2 years. We opened a new area. It's called Area 8 for now because it's our 8th park and does not yet have a name. We'll be working with our Indigenous communities to come up with a name and have started working on that. We've used technology now for the past 2 years through a very integrated reservation system that's tied into scanning at the gates and reservations, and to our finance systems and to our marketing data analytics systems. And it has really enabled us to take our visitor impact management strategy forward in a very meaningful way. And so we're drawing more visitors and we're making accessibility a priority. And we've actually seen, we were maybe on the leading edge of seeing a lot of the issues with crowding and the popularity of certain seasons and certain times and certain parks. And when they all come together 3 or 4 times a year, we were having to rely on, the Halton Region Police to manage traffic because it was backing onto regional roads and backing onto and blocking people's driveways and all of that. And since we launched these new innovations close to 1.5 years ago, we have seen, as I mentioned, an exponential increase in visitation, and we've had 0 days of backed up traffic, not had to rely on emergency services or rather police to manage traffic, because it's all we've come up with, based on our visitor impact management, what we feel the maximum capacity of any park should be at any given time. And those are the spots that are available. So there is a way, with a lot of data crunching, there has been a way for us to really optimize this. And a lot of our visitors thought that we brought this innovation in because of the pandemic. And we've been receiving lots of emails from them to say, if this was a pandemic thing, we encourage you to just keep it because it's just a better way for them to experience nature. Our beaches are through a reservation, and so is our ski operations, which opened just over 2 weeks ago. And the latest numbers I received this morning is in the last 2.5 weeks since opening, we've had 102,000 visitors to Glen Eden. Again, those are through reservations, so you have to book your time slot to come in and ski, and it's working out well. We do have a mandatory vaccine protocol in place for skiing as well, even though it is outdoors. And that's working really well for us as well. And that's there to protect our staff and the visitors and all the little kids that come in and learn to ski. GE, I should mention, and across the parks, we create about 800 seasonal jobs. About 600 of them are in right now at Glen Eden. All of these are funded through revenues that are not municipally funded. They are park expenses on the non-tax side. And so we take a lot of pride in creating this many jobs, and a lot of them for youth. to come out and work. And again, like any other business, this year in particular has been a challenge to recruit and to retain. And but we're doing a good job at Glen Eden. Just switching gears a little bit to climate change adaptation and mitigation. Again, I won't go through all of these, but what I will do is maybe draw your attention to a vision. So a lot of CAs, almost all conservation authorities, including CH, offer and have offered for decades lots of programs around watershed management that have really been about climate change. And it's now a question of how do we pull them into a cohesive program, cohesive lane, also looking at the changes to the Conservation Authorities Act. And even though we have a long runway to 2024, and we intend to really use that with our municipal partners, we've already had meetings with senior staff at the City of Hamilton and other CAs together at the table to see this has to be about public value. It has to be about our programs and how we deliver them collectively to Hamiltonians and other watershed residents. And so climate change is going to be a big part of that. What we'd like to do and have started to do is really take a three-stage approach at that. So, identifying what are the objectives of a watershed-wide climate action plan, who are the partners, try and get those partnerships in place early, and then looking at the data, looking at the inventory of programs, and really coming up with a good snapshot of total. And from there, through assessments, looking at gaps, looking at vulnerabilities, and then eventually coming up with recommendation actions for mitigation, and then performance measures, and then it becomes a cyclical thing. In terms of planning and permits, this is something that CH has done consistently for the last 5 years. We publish all our targets. And this has really helped focus us on service delivery. It's also helped counter some of the narrative that's been there and is still out there, not particularly CH, but generally about environmental regulations and CAs and being unresponsive or red tape or any of that. So when you can make commitments and then publish your targets, it kind of focuses the conversation where it should be focused and allows us to continue to make improvements. I should mention that any of these goals, 30 days, 90 days, they were stretch goals when we formed them. These are not the goals from the province. Percentages of 95% was a stretch percentage. The only reference to it in a previous provincial standards document was to 85%. We've exceeded that in many cases, almost 100% of the time. And again, this has been a tremendous amount of work that's gone into this, not just by the CA, but working with the municipal partners as well to look at processes, because quite often they do get embedded. We do get embedded in each other's processes as well. And lastly, floodplain mapping. I do want to draw your attention to this as well a little bit. CH embarked on a project about 3 years ago to update all watershed maps within our entire watershed. We actually started our focus in the Grindstone Creek, which is the Hamilton portion of our watershed. And as you can see, purple shaded area towards the bottom, we've actually completed that. We started on the Hamilton end of things. This was funded through the region of Halton. And so again, it's one of those things that we've been happy to offer as a benefit to, again, just seeing watersheds sometimes and not municipal boundaries. But this is a good news story to have the updated floodplain maps. And then we're going to continue to move across the watershed, and you can see our work plan as we go across, and it's funded through a long-term 10-year commitment from the region of Halton and any grants that are available to us either provincially or federally to subsidize the cost. And with that, again, I thank you for your time and your support as always. And if you'd like, Mr. Chair, I can stop sharing my screen.
Yes, please. Okay, Councillor Partridge, you had a question.
Yeah, thanks very much. And thank you, Hassan, for coming and presenting today. A wealth of information. And of course, I know firsthand from working closely with Conservation Halton, which covers, I think, the majority of Ward 15. But I do have a couple of questions, if I may. I'm just wondering, this has been asked by some of my colleagues to some previous presenters, the changes to the Conservation Act, I'm just wondering what the impact has been. You did touch on it, but I mean, it threw everybody into a bit of a tailspin when it first came down the tube, and I'm just wondering what the experience has been on conservation, Halton.
Thank you, Councillor Partridge, and good to see you, even though it's virtually. You know, Lisa touched on some of the changes in terms of governance and administrative things that were made that we're already complying with, and where a CA can't work with them, such as the Hamilton CA. You know, given its structure in a number of municipalities, there's a way to ask for exemptions and things like that. But those are relatively minor, and I say they're relatively minor because even though the perception that there was unaccountability and that was larger than the reality of it. And so once these were announced, every CA delivered on time. They fixed whatever needed to be fixed, and on we go. The bigger impacts and the bigger concerns were always around the ability of CAs to ensure a watershed lens to helping their municipalities grow and looking at sustainability and looking at the public interest and working there. And so you're correct. When the initial intent was signaled by the province, it was quite scary, quite limiting, quite oversimplified. Since then, we've come a long way. And you know, the forming of the Conservation Authorities Working Group and the ability to have 6 or 7 CAs on that group, and actually have the ability to provide direct advice to the minister on the content of regulations. It was unexpected that we actually got that ability and have been able to work through it. It's been a lot of work, you know, for everybody that's involved. It's been a lot of work for me chairing all those meetings, and but the result has been that the first phase of regulations are done, and CAs have overwhelmingly endorsed those, and so we were able to go from that position stated in a letter 18 or 19 months ago that essentially said CAs should just stop doing everything and really focus on their core, to where we are today. We've managed to protect, with a lot of support from our municipal partners. Our most vocal supporter has been AMO, both at the steering committee and publicly, and all the local councils. And I think, you know, at the end, that very clear desire was heard by the province, and the working group was allowed to do its work unencumbered. And actually with a lot of engagement by the minister himself, 2 ministers in this case, because we've had a change. So where we are today, it does create categories. It does create a lot of administrative burden to work through. But I think if we get through that, it does allow for councils and CAs to have a lot of clarity on what are the projects that are being delivered, why are they being delivered, what is the outcome that is being proposed, and can we track progress against that outcome, and not just focused on budgets and percentages. And so, you know, I think that in the long run, that's not a bad thing. It's how Halton has tried to work over the last 5, 6, 7 years anyway. And so it will require some MOUs to be signed, and we're working through those. But I think when you look at the presentations you've had today from Hamilton, Halton, the Grand, you look at the outcomes that are being achieved, you know, my concern is that we ensure that we protect those outcomes, because it really doesn't matter if it's a CAA or B or the city doing it. Are we collectively partnering to deliver public value? I think that's when we do best with our programs and services. And so getting that longer runway to work on those agreements was very important. Initially, the deadline was for this year, which between a municipal election and a provincial election would have been very challenging to achieve. But now that we have more time, we can talk more, we can collaborate more. And I'm hoping that we can retain that multi-barrier expertise and approach that CAs offer, right? So there are dams and channels, they're a line of defense. We have to manage them, we have to maintain them. Then there's all the investment in science and monitoring, so we can look at our landscape. Where can we enhance? Where can we remove invasives? Where can we look at wetlands? How can we restore creeks? And then there's the final barrier, which is the role of conservation authorities in permits. And so how can we keep development, you know, and encourage it in areas, more than encourage it, actually regulate it, so that it goes in areas that are safe and that aren't encumbering the municipality with future costs, posed by hazards and the risk of flooding and hard infrastructure that's expensive to build and maintain. So those natural solutions are very much a part of that. And so, you know, I'm quite confident there is a specific mandatory program around watershed resource strategies, which is really encouraging. It's in fact the first time the province has recognized that watershed-based role and has kind of said, okay, well, rather than having CAs simply be called watershed-based agencies, why don't you take 2 or 3 years to work with the municipalities to really define what programs fall under that, come up with a funding strategy. And so even though it's going to be difficult and time-consuming, if we do it right, the end result might actually set us up for a very good collaborative relationship moving forward.
And that is a great explanation. So what, you know, my takeaway from that is what initially had, you know, different folks in the conservation industry scared was, you know, more to do with the perception. But once getting the information and particularly forming the provincial committee, and thank you for your work on that and steering and leadership, you know, because I think that has been a benefit to all conservation areas, certainly within our area, but even in the broader province of Ontario. I just wanted to make a couple of comments. You know, I can't let your presentation go by without commenting on just the incredible events and programs that are being offered, even during COVID, through Mountsburg. Mountsburg, you know, many think, oh, it's Halton Conservation. It's not in Hamilton, but it is. It's in Hamilton. It's in my ward. It's right on the boundary. It's well visited and just, you know, amazing raptor program. And now they've got the lit trail at night, which is fantastic. We've actually spent some time over there, but you know, the Flamborough Centre wetland project that you touched on, you know, and I just want my colleagues to understand that this is, you know, out in Flamborough Centre, which is north of Waterdown. It is out in the rural area. There is a fair amount of residential around it, and actually Flamborough Centre School is there, but there hasn't really been any park. And excuse me, the Flamborough Centre Park, as it was called, was really mostly underwater, I think, for the majority of the year. And so the decision, you know, working with city staff and my office and Halton Conservation, it's absolutely brilliant that this park is now going to be turned into a wetland park. And certainly from being there for the tree planting and residents volunteering, the residents are so excited because they've never had a park. And this is going to have trails, and there's little lakes, and there's, I think, 4 wetland areas that are being developed and new flora and fauna. So I just want to say how much I appreciate the work that staff are doing there. The building permits, we have a ton of applications coming from Ward 15. And, you know, by and large, I'm hearing very, very positive about the turnaround time and the working between our building department and your staff there as well. So finally, Carlisle Courtcliff Park. You know, and all of these areas, there is a real cross-pollination of residents from the Milton area and, you know, the Carlisle area and Hamilton in general, going to Glen Eden, which, you know, our favorite ski area. We love it to death. It's 10 minutes from our home. So how much I appreciate the partnership, not just with the city, but the partnership with staff and with other community groups that we have as well. Thank you, Hassan. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And I see no other speakers, so saying to you and your staff, Marnie and yourself, thanks for the presentation today. And if you could turn your cameras off, I'll move on to our final presenter, which is the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority. I'd like to turn it over to Councillor Brenda Johnson. I know she was a council rep on that Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority board, along with Councillor Clark, and Brenda was also the chair in 2021. So I'll turn it over to you, Brenda, for the introduction.
Well, thank you, Deputy Mayor. So due to the new and improved Conservation Authorities Act, this will be my last year as the chair for the NPCA. But in the past 3 years that both Councillor Clark and myself have been on the MPCA board, to say the least, we joined this board at the most difficult of times would be an understatement. But I think we're proud to say that the MPCA has been redirected onto the right course. So in the past 3 years, we have been working tirelessly to address all of the Auditor General's comments and recommendations. And I believe one of the board's biggest success stories has been hiring Chandra Sharma. Chandra comes to us from the Toronto Conservation Authority with an amazing resume, and her skill set serving the public and dealing with staff and board members has been absolutely exceptional. Every year, Vice Chair Bruce McKenzie and myself, and I believe he's listening online, send out Chandra's evaluation to board members and to the senior staff. And I can say with honesty that we are extremely blessed to have such a compassionate, hardworking, intelligent person at the helm. So thank you, Chandra, for making my job as the chair a pleasure. And Chandra will introduce her staff who are present with us today and also listening online. And just give everyone a heads up, I really appreciate all your support for the MPCA going forward. Chandra, on to you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sandra, go ahead now with your presentation.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Chair Johnson, for that wonderful introduction. Humbled. Members of the council, thanks for having us. I want to start by thanking City Manager Smith and General Manager Zagaric, other general managers and staff team of Hamilton for their collaboration on various aspects of NPCA work. The relationship couldn't have been better, and I feel really honored to be working in this geography. Joining me today is our Director of Corporate Services, Lise Gagnon, who will be presenting the financials with me. Director of Watershed, Ms. Leilani Lee Yates, who recently came to NPCA from Halton and working in Peel on many of the very complex planning files, brings a wealth of experience on climate change matters, land management matters, and watershed planning. And also Director of Land Operations, Adam Christie, who's been working with the other CAs and City of Hamilton for quite some time now. We also want to acknowledge the leadership of our Hamilton representatives, our Chair, Brenda Johnson, Member Clark, and our two community representatives, Member Beattie and Member Wright. Under your leadership, we've made exceptional progress in 2021. And despite COVID and all the pressures of Conservation Authority Act, we marched along and we have accomplished so much. So in our presentation today, I would like to provide you a snapshot of 2021 accomplishments, our priorities for 2022 supported by Hamilton Levy. And in working with our budget, we have considered your levy guidelines. We have augmented on our self-generated revenue to address some of our pressures. And we focused on strategic priorities for NPCA. Long-term planning at NPCA is the new normal. We've also addressed CA Act transition requirements and some of the things that we have to do, and long-term capital planning. We focused on filling the science gaps and data gaps to support your planning needs in the headwater areas, while maintaining the service levels that Hassan was just talking about for both planning and our parks. I want to start by saying that City of Hamilton is an extremely important position and partner for NPCA, being in the headwater, being the headwater municipality of Welland River and 20 Mile Creek, with approximately 21% of our geography. And one of our most popular conservation area, one of our flagship areas with 376 hectares of green space available to the residents of Hamilton and Niagara and surrounding GTA communities. Like I said, NPCA has made tremendous progress in rebuilding a very strong conservation organization. As you can tell from our annual reports, a solid framework of measures, outcomes, and results is now the new normal as we transform our organization back to an excellent conservation agency. Completion of our 10-year strategic plan has been a highlight of our work this year, led by staff and board. We are most proud of our engagement process and participation of community. Over 4,300 visitors visited our webpage where the strategic plan was posted for community comments. 500 visitors engaged in providing direct comments to NPCA and responded to the surveys, and 90 people attended the virtual sessions. It was all done during COVID, all done during the Conservation Authority Act, and we took a calculated risk of marching along with the strategic plan because we were focused on the long-term work of Conservation Authority in addressing the important issue that we've been talking about all morning, climate change, adaptability of our watershed, and accommodating growth and more communities in our watershed. The strategic plan charts the course for our work with 6 strategic directions, 21 goals, and each goal is supported by a measurable actions or key performance indicator. And these overarching strategic priorities are 3 inward-facing, 3 outward-facing related to our work in the watershed. Climate and healthy resilient watersheds, supporting sustainable growth, connecting people to nature, strengthening partnerships, financial sustainability, and organizational excellence. So with the completion of this strategic plan, we are now launching into the operational and business planning aspects of our work in 2022. And through this plan, we look forward to enhancing our support to City of Hamilton priorities in the areas of sustainable growth, environment, infrastructure, planning, public recreation, and engagement opportunity. So with that, I would like to highlight some aspects of NPCA work that provided value to Hamilton residents in 2021. 2021 presented another significant year in regards to park attendance, especially at Binbrook. And this data relates to our 4 active parks, Balls Falls, Binbrook, Chippewa, and Long Beach. The active park visitation in 2021 reached over 120,000 visitors, and those majority of were from locally Niagara and Hamilton and surrounding GTA areas. Including the active parks, we also have 37 properties where visitation was significantly increasing all through 2021, available to Hamilton residents on the other side in Niagara, and they're all available free of cost to the resident for their well-being and stewardship. Beyond that, what we also saw in our parks was the increase in use for over 30% year over year. Our data indicates this growing trend line, and this growing day use trend clearly demonstrates that demand for regional green space is increasing. And numbers may have gone slightly up because of the pandemic, but however, research is showing that this demand will continue to grow, and we have to keep up with this demand in providing the right infrastructure for the communities. So along those lines, if you look at Binbrook in 2021, Binbrook Conservation Area welcomed over 125,000 people throughout the year, including 60,000 day use, 1,500 membership pass visitors, and over 4,000 special events during the pandemic with appropriate public health guidelines. And these 2 events were the Mud Girl and treetop trekking. This overall reflected a substantial growth to the Binbrook Conservation Area. And to keep up with that, and thanks to your support, we were also able to undertake and complete a lot of capital projects in Binbrook in 2021. Treetop Pavilion was completed in May of 2021. Septic system was upgraded. and completed in December 2021. Water system was upgraded and scheduled to be upgraded or completed in January 2022. And all of that due to your support that you agreed to give us that funding support in the first year that I was here. And I really thank you all for that, because it was so timely to complete all of this work for the amount of numbers we are now seeing in Binbrook Conservation Area. Now, as my colleagues have mentioned, we also have a requirement of the Conservation Authority Act to work on management plan and update all those management plan. So we have all of our areas, 41 parks. We are working on a plan to update the management plans for all of these areas, and Binbrook will be included in that scheduling. So there's more work to come in the coming years. Once again, I also want to thank you for the purchase of a property of land on the other side of lake near Panko. Initially, when acquired, it was a farm field. And now it's a wonderful 40 acres of ecologically restored site, enabling wildlife habitat and ecological diversity. Thanks to the support of Glenbrook Committee and a variety of residents there, a lot of community members who helped NPCA with the restoration of this area. We're working on the process of completing our land acquisition strategy and looking forward to working with you or other municipal partners on creative ways to finance and implement and bring more land under public ownership, addressing climate change issues, as you've heard before from my colleagues. Binbrook septic upgrade was a significant project in our asset inventory, which we were able to address with your support. NPCA is one of the first conservation authorities that has developed a very sound asset management program. We received FCM funding for that, Federation of Canadian Municipalities. This asset management program will be completed in 2022 and will address our significant state of good repair gap across our watershed. Additionally, as part of our climate change commitment, we'll be undertaking a natural green infrastructure asset accounting as part of this initiative in the coming years using external funding, and that will set a good template for how natural assets should be accounted for in our asset management planning. Integrated watershed planning, again, is data updates and ongoing technical information that we produced is critical to support evidence-based decision-making for infrastructure projects and planning as we experience growth and intensification within our watershed, and we'll continue to do that. So over the past, I would say, few years, our workload on the planning and permitting side has also increased, both on the plan review and permits and compliance across our watershed. These numbers reflect the Hamilton side of our planning commitments, with approximately over 150 plan review and permits in that geography of our watershed in the headwater areas. And we, overall in Niagara, we are processing over 1,200 permits a year. We continue to maintain our service standards with current resources. We're also initiating a planning fee review to make sure we are operating with full cost accounting and proper planning fees, as we must say. We are pleased to be part or participating in the Hamilton official plan update and supporting your environmental planning needs with our permitting and compliance role. This is an interesting slide to address the, it says a lot, there's a lot of text here, but it's important. To address your data and science needs for future intensification and growth, we are investing in critical science, including proactive sub-watershed data and technical studies where we have the gaps, updating regulation mapping and our natural area inventory, setting up monitoring programs where we see monitoring is required to understand the baseline and make the right decisions. Enhancing our capacity for watershed science, hydrogeology, ecology, water resources, engineering, and low impact development expertise, working with other conservation authorities who have that. Green infrastructure expertise. We are also building a team to support municipal infrastructure project in a timely manner. So with that, we also continue to deliver water monitoring program. Reports are available online. We have 11 surface and 1 groundwater monitoring station in the Hamilton geography of our watershed. With respect to our flood forecasting functions, we have 3 stream gauges in Hamilton and 4 climate stations, and we issue flood warning as appropriate. Floodplain mapping was completed for the Welland River, and we are planning to update our data for both 20 Mile Creek and Welland River on the watershed side of things. In 2022, we are also going to be hiring an external engineering consultant to conduct a dam safety review on the NPCA's Binbrook Dam at Binbrook. These type of studies are required by the ministry every 5 years for a flood hazard perspective. A restoration program was recently established in 2019 and has achieved some big successes or big wins in a very short time with reforestation, wetland creation, and habitat restoration in 2021. Our applications, it's always full. We have more people asking for money than we can support. So we are right now looking at a feasibility study to enhance the restoration program to broader and bigger project and in more diverse areas. So that work is ongoing, and we'll be coming back to your staff to show them what we have done and consult them as needed to see what we can do in the headwater areas. Because every time we do a restoration project, it should be informed by science, and that's the approach we are taking now. The grassroots work of Conservation Authority, as you've heard from my colleagues, is critical in facilitating conservation and connecting people with nature. Our volunteer base is growing, approximately 1,600 volunteers. We also have very strong academic partnerships with several projects on the go. And like my colleague Hassan Bassett said, we employ 97 students, and many of them go on to become conservation leaders and find jobs in the conservation sector. And that's a significant contribution of all conservation authorities to the local economy and building leaders of tomorrow. I also want to give a shout out to the Glanbrook Conservation Committee. Well, their work is phenomenal, and for the last 30 years, they have been supporting the work of NPCA by assisting with water quality, wildlife habitat improvement in and around Lake Niapanico, and they've contributed more than 538 on-site volunteer hours. And the project I talked about, the restoration of this new site we purchased, they planted over 2,360 native trees, 3,215 shrubs, and 20 acres of grassland is now planted or restored in this newly acquired property. Thanks also to Chair Johnson, who continuously donates her NPCA honorarium to this committee and to the NPCA Foundation. And with her help, this project was made successful in Hamilton. I also want to conclude or mention this, that as a fiscally responsible organization, NPCA is taking initiative to diversify our revenues and leverage municipal levy where we can. Our ratio from self-generated to municipal levy is pretty balanced right now. We have 17 funding partnership agreements on the go, worth $1 million. We have five over $6 million of funding applications that are pending decisions for climate change work, tree planting work, park infrastructure work. I have a good news that we have been approved for some funding, which is pretty significant. I cannot announce it yet, but hopefully you'll hear about it in a month or so. We are also undertaking a planning fee review and a park fee review to make sure that this long standing gap. We've never done this at NPCA, and we have to catch up on a lot of backlog here. So we are doing that. Once again, this is the end of my presentation. I want to thank you, staff and council, for your tremendous support. I'll be able to take any questions, and I will now hand it over to Lise to present our budget. And Lise, I understand I'll be moving the slides for you. So take it on from here.
Thank you, Chandra. Good afternoon, members of the General Issues Committee. So this is our presentation of the 2022 financials. Next slide, please. This one represents the funding sources for our 2022 operating budget. As Chandra mentioned, the municipal funding, which still represents the largest portion, of our total revenues at 58%, is decreasing. It was 63% in 2021 and 65% in 2020. Please note the general levy is in line with the municipal budget guidelines. Our operating volume has increased by 10.2% in 2022, 2% of that from the general levy, and the residual 8.2% from increases in authority-generated funds. The proportion of self-generated revenues from land operations and permits and fees largely is increasing and constitutes 31.7% of total revenues for 2022, so up from 27.1 in 2021 and 25.3 in 2020. So we assumed normal non-pandemic operations for 2022, and we're keeping our fingers crossed. Next slide, please. This represents the draft operating budget expenses. So overall expenses in the zero-based 2022 operating budget are up by 10.2% as were revenues, 2% of which is funded through the increase to the general levy again, and the residual through self-generated funds. Expenses do include meeting operating priorities related to core hazard management mandate. Next slide, please. This is the 2022 levy apportionment. I think we're missing a slide. Okay. My apologies. I had my speaking notes in the wrong order. So this is the general levy apportionment provided by to the CA from MNRF using MPAC current value assessment data. The levy apportionment is applied to calculate both the general levy and each municipality's portion of shared capital projects. So for example, the asset management piece. In keeping with prior periods, slight changes in apportionment ratios driven by changes in CVA result in minor fluctuations in terms of variances year over year. The total consolidated increase in the general levy for 2022 adheres to the municipal guidelines of 2%. So the volatility in terms of absolute dollars is not material. So now draft capital and special projects should be next, Chandra. I think we missed one. About 3 back. There we go. There. So this is the capital and special projects, represents past backlog and current critical priorities. So shared projects, as I mentioned in the previous slide, so IT infrastructure, for example, asset management, are split in accordance with the 2022 levy apportionment ratios. I can certainly provide detail on any of those projects upon request. So Hamilton's portion of the 2022 capital and special projects budget is $233,000. It was $1.4 million in 2021, and it represents 13.3% of the total envelope. And on to the municipal levy slide, thank you. So the general levy is increasing by $83,000. My apologies. It's increasing by 2% overall for a consolidated increase. Slight variations by municipality against the 2% are due to fluctuations in CVA that I mentioned on a previous slide. So the special levy in support of capital and special projects is increasing to address critical priorities and state of good repair backlog on the asset base. Next slide, Chandra, please. Thank you, and happy to answer any questions.
I can now stop sharing to take
Yeah,
it.
please do. Thank you.
Thank
And just for clarity, what is the percentage increase in the budget affecting Hamilton? Is it the 5.4% that we saw on the last slide?
It's 4.5, Councillor Ferguson, which amounts to, and Lise can confirm, is that 4.5, Lise?
Yes, actually, it is 4.48. My apologies. I should have mentioned that in that slide.
4.48. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's a total absolute dollar increase of 67,515.
Okay. So I have Councillor Jackson.
Oh, thank you, Deputy Mayor Ferguson, and thank you, CAO Sharma, for your presentation. I think we first met, I think you were appointed just before COVID. Was it a year or two before COVID that you were introduced to us in the council chambers? So it was great to see your fresh face in charge of the top bureaucratic position with NPCA. And I think before I get to one question I have for you, I think, was it not that our Councillor Johnson, if memory serves me right, was the first ever Hamilton councillor that was chair of the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority? Given the fact we have such minuscule number of seats on that board, that was precedent setting, and that was both a great tribute to Councillor Johnson and the respect she carries amongst so many, and of course I hope to our City of Hamilton's contribution as well. So my question to you, CAO Sharma, if you recall, I had asked this a couple of years ago when you delegated in the chambers. Bimbrook Conservation Authority, great to see so much attention, financial contribution from NPCA into that extremely popular and growing conservation area, geographically located in our city, but part of your management portfolio of the NPCA. If you recall, I had asked about the dual membership issue at the time, CAO Sharma, that Hamilton residents who had an HCA membership, unfortunately, if I recall, correct me if I'm wrong, had to also pay for an NPCA membership to access the Bimbrook Conservation Area. I thought, unfortunately, that was unfair. Given the geographic location of Bimbrook Conservation Area. I remember I received a number of emails from my constituents who visited Bimbrook who said that, Councillor Jackson, it just seems wrong. As a Hamilton taxpayer, I have a valid HCA membership. Bimbrook's within the boundaries of Hamilton, and yet I've got to buy a second membership from the NPCA. So no criticism, but just wondering if there's been some positive resolution of that matter of the dual membership, especially for residents of Hamilton who hold a valid HCA membership. Through you, Deputy Mayor Ferguson, please.
Go ahead, Chandra.
To you, Deputy Mayor Ferguson, you have a very valid question. You did raise it. And I must say that I can't agree with you enough. Yes, this is an issue that needs to be corrected, and it's not a difficult one to correct. All we need to do is, figure out a way to have one membership for that geography of our watershed and allow people ease of use of our parks. And I can assure you, between the Director of Parks and myself, that we are going to take it back and facilitate that with Hamilton Conservation Authority. It's the background. We can share revenues and whatever, but on the front end to members of the public, it should be a single membership from that perspective. And my apologies that it hasn't been done to date because, I came on board and within a month we were hit by the pandemic. And then within a few months we were hit by Conservation Authority Act. And since that day, it's just ongoing. And I can promise you we'll look into that. For sure.
CAO Sharma, thank you even for your open-mindedness, for remembering and taking it further under advisement. But sincerely, I want to commend you and the new board. Optically, it's been a massive turnaround in terms of the optics of the NPCA. I've been no part of it whatsoever. I'm not trying to be an armchair quarterback looking back, but there were enough media and news stories that everybody was familiar with things that just seemed at times unsavory. So a tremendous salute to you and your new executive team and the board chaired by Councillor Johnson in turning that ship around. And thank you for remembering my issue on behalf of thousands of Hamilton HCA membership holders. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ferguson.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Now, Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have any questions, but I do have a comment, if I may.
Sure.
Thank you. First, I want to take this opportunity to acknowledge and thank Councillor Brenda Johnson for her work as chair of this Conservation Authority. It is understated the amount of work that she has done, the relationships that she has developed intermunicipally, and improving the culture of the board, which ultimately improves the well-being of all of our employees, and they feel better. They want to go to work now, whereas when we first came on the board, we were hearing that many staff just cringed at going into work. So it's not easy turning a large corporation ship around and making it more transparent and making it more engaged with the community. But Councillor Johnson did that, and she did that with a smile on her face the entire time. I also want to thank Chandra and the executive team at the Conservation Authority. I have come to rely on them for their expertise. They do a masterful job now with our organization. Everything from simply dealing with per diems all the way through to membership fees and all the different fees and application. It's astounding the amount of work that Misty and others do for this organization. So I really want to thank our staff, Chandra, and please extend that gratitude, not just from me, but I believe, Mr. Chairman, from our city council, that the staff and Chair Johnson have done a remarkable job in turning the NPCA around. And I enjoy serving on this board. Thank you, sir.
Okay, I have no more speakers. So Lise and Chandra, thank you for your presentation today. And with that, we're going to move on. I need one omnibus motion to receive all the presentations today. Moved by Johnson, seconded by Pearson. Discussion on it? Seeing none, all in favor. And Madam Clerk, I see I've disconnected from eScribe, but I support the motion and I'm trying to reload right now.
Thank you. I lost mine as well at one point today. Okay, Councillors Pauls and Partridge. Thank you, Councillor Partridge. And I think Councillor Pauls had to step away to take care of her.
Yeah, it didn't come up on mine, Stephanie, but yes, I am supportive. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay, that vote carries 13-0.
Okay, and no other business. I just need a motion to adjourn today. Moved by Partridge, seconded by Powers. All in favor?
There it goes. Thank you, everybody.
Okay,
Great
have a
job,
nice afternoon,
everybody.
everybody. We'll see you all tomorrow for council.